The aroma of pine and damp earth filled Aria's nostrils as she traced her path through the ancient forest. Her fingers brushed against tree bark, each with its unique texture forming an invisible map she had memorized over years of darkness. Night was falling heavy upon the shoulders of the pack. She could feel the tension in the air, dense as the fog that surely covered the valley below. It was the moon of choice, the night of the mating ceremony. "Aria, are you certain you want to participate?" The voice of Serena, her only friend in the pack, sounded concerned beside her. "You know how they treat you." Aria adjusted the old necklace at her throat, a simple moonstone pendant her grandmother had given her before dying. "A wolf finds her path even in darkness," she had often said. It was the only thing Aria had left of her, besides the stories of ancient wolves who saw beyond ordinary sight. "I must go," Aria replied, feeling the weight of each word. "I am part of the pack too." The murmur of conversations grew as they approached the great circle. Aria could distinguish dozens of voices blending together, the rustle of fabrics, the irregular rhythm of hearts quickened by anticipation. The ceremonies always awakened the more primitive side of their kind, and she, Aria, the only blind Omega wolf in the entire history of the Northern Pack, was heading to the most visual and hierarchical event of their tradition. The footsteps around them ceased. She knew they were being watched. "Look who decided to show up!" A female voice cut through the air like a razor. Valeria, daughter of the Chief Beta and favorite candidate for the Alpha King's choice. "The blind one came to watch the ceremony." Restrained laughter spread like ripples. It wasn't news. Aria had been the pack's entertainment for years. The defective wolf who stumbled on her own paws, who needed help to hunt, who would never, ever be chosen by anyone. "Ignore them," whispered Serena, her arm linked with Aria's as she guided her. Aria breathed deeply, letting her other senses take over. The smell of roasted meat came from the great central fire. Drums were beginning to be tuned. The nervous sweat of young, unmated female wolves permeated the air, and rising above everything else, a scent she knew only from a distance: musk, burnt wood, and something wild, indescribable, the smell of a true alpha. "Is he here already?" she asked Serena, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, he's on the elevated throne. I've never seen Magnus so—" She hesitated. "Imposing." Magnus, the name rarely spoken directly. The Alpha King, who had unified 3 packs after a bloody war that had cost Aria her parents' lives. She had been only 10 when she became both orphaned and blind, an attack on their former village that left invisible scars on all of them. The elders guided everyone to their places. Aria felt Serena being called to another section. She was a beta after all. As an Omega, Aria was supposed to sit in the farthest places, almost outside the circle. That was her place in the hierarchy, at the edges, never at the center. "Over here, Aria." The voice of Elder Orion sounded almost bored as he guided her. His fingers barely touched her elbow, as if mere contact might contaminate him with her weakness. Aria walked attentively to the sound of her own footsteps on the stone ground. She mentally counted 15 steps to the Omega row. But on the 10th step, something strange happened. An abrupt silence fell over the crowd, so complete that even the crackling of the fire seemed to have ceased. "What's happening?" she whispered to Orion, but he had stopped walking, his hand frozen in the air. That's when she felt that presence, like a wall of heat and power before her. The scent intensified to the point of making her heart race. Instinctively, she lowered her head in submission. "Your Majesty," Orion's voice came out strangled. "I am merely conducting this Omega to her place." A low growl, almost inaudible to common ears, made the hair on Aria's neck stand up, but it wasn't directed at her. "Her place is no longer decided by you, Orion." The voice was deep, resonating not just in the air, but inside her chest. She had never heard it so close. Magnus, the Alpha King, was less than 3 feet away from her. She felt fingers touch her chin, calloused, strong, yet with a disconcerting gentleness. They lifted her face, and though she couldn't see, she knew he was studying her. "Aria, daughter of Helena and Richard of the former Eastern Pack," he said, and the shock of hearing her full name on his lips almost made her stumble. "Do you know the traditions of the mating ceremony?" She swallowed hard, feeling the gaze of hundreds of wolves upon them. Her voice came out steadier than she had expected. "Yes, Your Majesty. The Alpha chooses first, then the Betas, and so on, following the hierarchy. And what happens when the Alpha makes his choice?" Her heart seemed to want to escape through her throat. It was a rhetorical question. Everyone knew the answer. "The Chosen One sits beside the Alpha's throne as a symbol of his preference before the ceremony continues." She felt his fingers slide from her chin to her arm, lightly touching the moonstone pendant. For a moment, she thought she heard him catch his breath. "Follow me," he ordered. And it wasn't a request. His hand enveloped hers, and she was led forward, climbing steps she didn't even know existed. The murmurs grew around them, like a storm forming. She heard exclamations of shock, some muffled protests. Someone, probably Valeria, let out a high-pitched sound of indignation. "Your Majesty, there must be some mistake." The voice of one of the counselors sounded nervous. "This is Aria. I know exactly who she is." Magnus's cutting tone silenced any other comment. Aria felt herself being guided to a seat to the right of what could only be the Alpha's throne. The wood was soft, carved, very different from the rustic benches where the Omegas sat. The scent of wildflowers and herbs enveloped the place, prepared to receive a queen, not a blind Omega. "This is an outrage!" The voice of Helena, Valeria's mother and companion to the Chief Beta, cut through the silence. "She cannot even see. How can she stand by the king's side?" The roar that followed was so fierce that Aria instinctively cowered. She felt the warmth of Magnus's body close to hers, protecting her. "Do you question my choice, Helena?" His voice was nothing more than a dangerous whisper. "Or the wisdom of the moon that guides us on this sacred night?" The silence that followed was answer enough. No one questioned the authority of a true Alpha, much less that of the king who had unified 3 packs with claw and blood. When he sat down beside her, his shoulder lightly brushing against hers, she realized the magnitude of what had just happened. She, Aria, the blind Omega whom everyone despised, was sitting beside the Alpha King at the mating ceremony, to the horror and scandal of the entire pack. The drums began to play, marking the official start of the ceremony. But for the first time since she had lost her sight, she desperately wished she could see, to behold the face of the man beside her, and understand what was behind this gesture that had just turned her world upside down. She felt his fingers brush against hers briefly before withdrawing, a touch so light she might have imagined it. But then he leaned in, his warm breath against her ear, causing shivers throughout her body. "You cannot imagine how long I've waited for this moment, little wolf," he whispered, his words for her alone, the last daughter of the clan of Seers. Her blood froze in her veins. How did he know about the secret her grandmother had taken to the grave? The mystery of their ancestors who saw beyond physical eyes. Before she could process his words, Magnus stood up, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Let the ceremony continue," he announced to the stunned crowd. "The moon of choice has only begun." And so, with the entire pack in a state of shock and her heart beating erratically, she understood that her life would never be the same. The rest of the ceremony passed like a nebulous dream. The drums resonated within her chest as couples were formed following the hierarchy. After Magnus's shocking choice, the Betas made their selections, then the high-ranking warriors, and so on. Each announcement was followed by applause and howls of approval, except for the sepulchral silence that still lingered around the throne where she sat. "They hate me now more than ever," she murmured, low enough that only Magnus could hear. She felt his tense body beside her. The heat emanating from him was almost palpable. "They fear what they don't understand," he replied in an equally low voice, "and fear even more what has always been right in front of them, hidden in plain sight." His enigmatic words sent a shiver down her spine. Her fingers instinctively found the moonstone pendant warm against her skin. The night progressed, wine flowed freely, laughter grew louder, and the music changed to more primitive rhythms. It was the part of the ceremony where newly formed couples danced around the fire, celebrating the union blessed by the moon, a tradition of which she had always been a silent observer. "Your Majesty," a male voice approached. She recognized the deep tone of Dominic, the chief beta. "The elders request a word." Magnus didn't respond immediately. She noticed his breathing change, deeper, as if he were containing himself. "Aria." He finally addressed her, his voice surprisingly soft. "I must attend to the counselors. I'll return shortly." She nodded, trying to hide the sudden dread of being left alone, exposed to stares and whispers. As soon as Magnus moved away, she felt the air around her grow heavier with barely disguised hostility. It didn't take long for someone to approach. "Enjoying the view, Aria?" Valeria's voice distilled pure venom. "Oh, pardon me. I forgot you can't see anything." Cruel laughter accompanied her. Her followers, always ready to flatter the beta's daughter. Aria maintained an upright posture, her face turned toward Valeria's voice. Years of taunts had taught her that showing weakness only encouraged more cruelty. "The ceremony seems beautiful," she replied calmly. "The sounds, the scents, everything conveys joy." "Don't be ridiculous." Valeria moved closer, her artificial perfume almost suffocating Aria. "You don't belong in this place, much less by his side." She felt the brush of fingers in her fair hair and instinctively recoiled. "What do you think he saw in you?" Valeria continued, her voice now lower, threatening. "A joke. That's what you are. A momentary distraction? Perhaps an act of charity for the king to show how merciful he is to the weak." Each word was a small dagger, hitting insecurities that Aria had tried to bury for years. The worst part was that part of her feared Valeria might be right. What could an Alpha King want with someone like her? "Or perhaps," continued Valeria, leaning in to whisper in her ear, "he just wants something exotic in his bed. The novelty of a blind girl who has never seen his face. How pathetic." Her hands trembled on her lap, but she remained silent. Reacting would give Valeria exactly what she wanted. "You know nothing about him," she finally responded, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "And you do?" Valeria laughed, the sound cutting like broken glass. "Magnus has killed more wolves than you've known in your entire miserable life. He conquered 3 packs with blood and claws. Men tremble before him. And you think he genuinely cares about a defective Omega?" Unwanted memories flooded her mind. The screams during the attack that killed her parents, the smell of smoke and blood, the searing pain before permanent darkness. She was only 10, but she remembered perfectly the chaos of that night, the night when the then-young Alpha Magnus took their village. "I will find out what you did to deceive him," Valeria hissed, her hand gripping Aria's wrist with enough force to leave marks. "And when she does, then what?" The voice didn't belong to Magnus, but it carried enough authority to make Valeria immediately release Aria's arm. Serena, her friend, had emerged as an unexpected guardian. "This is none of your business, Serena," Valeria retorted, but there was a subtle tremor in her voice. "Any threat to the king's chosen is the business of the entire pack," Serena responded with confidence she had never demonstrated before. "Or do you also question the laws of the ancients?" Aria heard Valeria snort in anger, but she moved away, her heavy footsteps crushing twigs on the ground. "Are you all right?" Serena sat beside her, her hand gently covering Aria's. "I'm used to her," she replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "But thank you for intervening." Serena hesitated, her irregular breathing betraying her nervousness. "Aria, what's happening? No one understands why the king chose you. Not that you aren't—" She stumbled over the words. "It's just that there was never any sign, any interaction between you before." Aria ran her fingers over the moonstone pendant, feeling its smooth and comforting surface. "I don't know either, Serena," she confessed. "We never exchanged more than a few words in all these years." "The elders are furious," Serena whispered, leaning in closer. "They say this breaks centuries-old traditions, that an alpha, especially the king, must choose a strong partner who can bear powerful heirs." Serena's words were like needles, piercing the small bubble of hope that she didn't even know she had been cultivating. Of course, that was it. A king needed a queen worthy of the title, someone like Valeria, beautiful, strong, of pure lineage, not an orphan who could barely feed herself. "Magnus knows what he's doing," she replied, more to convince herself than Serena. Before Serena could say more, she felt that presence again, the air seeming thicker, charged with power. Magnus had returned, and he wasn't alone. "We need to talk, Aria." His voice sounded tense, controlled. "In private." She stood up, guiding herself by the sound of his voice. She felt his hand lightly touch her back, leading her away from the ceremony's bustle. They walked in silence for several minutes. The air grew fresher, the sound of the celebration diminishing until it became a distant murmur. By the smell of water and mossy stone, she realized they were near the sacred stream, the place where, according to tradition, the first alpha of their lineage had received the moon's blessing. "We are alone now," said Magnus, finally stopping. His proximity made her nervous in a way she had never experienced. Her heart was beating so loudly that she was sure he could hear it. "Why did you choose me?" The words escaped before she could contain them. "Everyone is saying it was a mistake, that—" "I don't make mistakes," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Not in matters such as this." She heard him move, feeling the vibration of his footsteps on the ground. He was circling around her, like a predator studying its prey, but there was no threat in his movements, only intense curiosity. "Do you know what it means to be an alpha's chosen, Aria?" She swallowed hard. "It means I will be your companion, your moon." "My queen," he corrected, his voice suddenly closer behind her. She felt his hot breath against her nape. "The mother of my children, the guardian of the pack when I am not present." An involuntary shiver ran through her body. The implications of his choice were much greater than she had considered in the initial shock. "I cannot be that," she whispered, the painful truth escaping her lips. "I am weak, blind, everyone laughs at me. How can I lead when I can barely take care of myself?" His hands touched her shoulders, gently turning her to face him. She felt the warmth of his body so close to hers. "Is that what you truly believe? That you are weak?" She lowered her head, shame burning her face. "You know it's true." A low sound vibrated in his chest, not a growl, but something similar to a contained laugh. "Aria, daughter of Helena." His voice acquired an almost reverent tone. "You survived the massacre that killed experienced warriors. You learned to navigate a world of darkness when others would have given up. You endured years of contempt and cruelty without ever losing your dignity." His fingers touched her face, tracing the contour of her jaw with a surprising delicacy for someone so powerful. "But above all," he continued, "you are the last descendant of the Seers, the oldest and most powerful lineage that ever existed among our kind." Her entire body froze. "How do you know about that? My grandmother made me swear never to speak of it to anyone." Magnus took her hands in his, large and calloused from combat. "Because I've been searching for you for years," he answered. His voice carried an emotion she couldn't identify. "Since I read the ancient manuscripts in my family's library, they spoke of a special lineage, wolves who could see beyond physical eyes, who saw hidden truths, possible futures, the very essence of the magic that binds us to the moon." Her heart raced. The stories her grandmother told weren't just legends to entertain a blind granddaughter. "The Seers were considered sacred," continued Magnus, "advisors to the greatest alphas until they were hunted by those who feared their power." "But I have no power," she protested. "I am merely blind. I see nothing, neither present nor future." She felt his fingers touch the moonstone pendant around her neck. "This crystal belonged to your grandmother, and before her, to her mother, passed from seer to seer for generations." "How do you know this?" she asked, stunned. Because it was an ancestor of mine who gave it to the first seer centuries ago. His voice lowered to an almost reverent tone. The pact between wolf and moon, between strength and wisdom. He held the small crystal between his fingers, and she felt a strange vibration emanating from it, something she had never perceived before. This stone is not common, Aria. It was bathed in the blood of the first seer and blessed under the full moon. It is a catalyst, an awakener. Awakener of what? Your true gift. His fingers released the pendant, which returned to rest against her skin, which has nothing to do with seeing the physical world. She shook her head, confused and stunned by so many revelations. Even if this were true, what does it have to do with you choosing me at the ceremony? Why now? The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken meanings. Finally, Magnus sighed, a surprisingly human sound coming from someone who seemed more myth than man. Because the storm is coming, Aria, and without a seer by my side, we will all perish. The sudden wind that lashed the trees around them seemed to emphasize his ominous words, as if nature itself confirmed the imminent danger. And she, standing there in the darkness that was her constant world, felt for the first time the weight of a destiny much greater than she had ever imagined. A destiny intertwined with that of the most powerful and feared man of all packs. "What storm?" she asked, her voice failing at the end. The air had suddenly cooled, and it wasn't just the wind that was now blowing stronger. Magnus took a step closer to her. His heat was like a furnace in the cold night. Instinctively, she leaned toward him. "For 3 moons," he began, "I've been receiving reports of attacks on the western borders." His voice was low and grave. "At first, we thought they were just lost human hunters or wild wolves. But then bodies began to appear, torn apart in ways that no common animal would be capable of." A chill ran down her spine. The pack had commented on more frequent patrols, but no one had mentioned deaths. Why wasn't the pack informed? She questioned. "Because panic is as dangerous as the threat itself," he replied, with the pragmatism of a leader accustomed to making difficult decisions. Besides, there was something peculiar about the attacks. His hesitation alerted her. Magnus wasn't a man to falter. "The victims had something in common," he continued. "They all belonged to ancient lineages, families with histories of special gifts." Her heart skipped a beat. "Like the Seers." "Exactly." His fingers touched her arm, sliding down to find her hand. The contact sent an electric current throughout her body. "2 weeks ago, we found ritual marks on the bodies, symbols we hadn't seen in generations." "What symbols?" "The bloody moon, the mark of the light devourers." The name awakened a distant memory, one of the darkest stories her grandmother told in whispers, always checking if they were truly alone before beginning. "The gift hunters," she murmured, words emerging from somewhere deep in memory. "Those who feed on the magical essence of the moon's chosen ones." She felt Magnus tense beside her. "How do you know about this?" "My grandmother told stories. She said they were the ones who nearly exterminated our lineage centuries ago." She instinctively touched the pendant. "She spoke of them being neither human nor wolf, but something corrupted between the 2 worlds." "She was right," Magnus confirmed, his voice now more urgent. "The Devourers have returned stronger and more organized, and they are systematically hunting anyone with special gifts." "But this doesn't explain why you chose me at the ceremony," she insisted. "If I am indeed their target, exposing me as your companion only places me in greater danger." The silence that followed was heavy. Then, without warning, she felt his fingers touch her face, not like before, but with the intention of mapping every feature, every line. She froze in surprise at the intimacy of the gesture. 2 reasons. His voice was closer now, almost a whisper against her skin. "First, as my chosen, you will be under constant protection. No one in the pack would dare betray you, not even those who still question my decision." His fingers traced the curve of her cheek, descending to the outline of her lips. Her breath caught in her throat. "And the second?" He hesitated, something rare for an alpha. "The second reason is purely selfish. Before she could process his words, she felt his breath against her lips. For a fleeting moment, she thought he might kiss her, and more shocking still was realizing how much she desired it. But he moved away slightly. "Since the first time I saw you, Aria, something in you called to me." It wasn't pity, as many would assume. It was recognition. Recognition of what? Of someone who carries scars like mine, but doesn't allow them to define who they are. His words caught her off guard. Magnus, the powerful Alpha King, comparing his wounds to hers, he whom everyone feared and respected, feeling connected to her, the insignificant blind Omega. "You know nothing about me," she said, unknowingly repeating the same words she had used against Valeria. A low, hoarse laugh escaped him. "I know more than you imagine, little wolf." His hand left her face, but remained close, his warmth still perceptible. "I know that every full moon night you escape alone to the Lament Cliff, where you sing to the void." Her entire body froze. No one knew about her secret escapades, not even Serena. "I know that when you think no one is watching, you dance with the wind, moving with a grace that many with perfect vision would never achieve." His voice acquired a softer tone. "And I know that, despite everything you've suffered, you still find beauty in this cruel world." Unexpected tears burned in her blind eyes. How could he know such things? How could he have observed her in moments when she believed herself to be completely alone? "You spied on me?" she suddenly accused, feeling vulnerable and exposed. "I protected you," he corrected, without a shadow of regret. "Since I knew who you really were, I designated myself as your silent guardian." The revelation was too much to process. For how long had he been there in the shadows, witnessing her most private moments? Why hadn't he approached before? Why wait until today? His sigh carried the weight of difficult decisions and enormous responsibilities. "Because I couldn't risk drawing attention to you," he said, "before I was certain about the threat. And because," he paused, "I needed to be sure I was ready for what this would mean." "And what does it mean?" "Defying centuries of tradition, facing the disapproval of the elders and the other packs, and more importantly," his voice lowered to almost a whisper, "giving up the control to which I've clung for so long." His words carried a deeper meaning that she didn't fully understand yet. Before she could question further, a distant howl cut through the night. A warning. The guards. "Something is wrong," Magnus muttered, suddenly alert. Without warning, he pulled her close, a protective arm around her. His entire body was tense, ready to attack or defend. More howls joined the first, creating a symphony of alarm that echoed through the mountains. "They are here." His voice was a low growl. "The Devourers have found our celebration." Her blood ran cold. "How? The ceremony is protected by ancient spells." "Which are useless if someone inside breaks the protection circle," he replied, contained fury in every word. "We have a traitor among us." The sound of hurried footsteps approaching interrupted their conversation. By the smell of pine and leather, she recognized Dominic, the chief beta. "Your Majesty!" His voice was breathless. "They attacked the northern border. 3 guards killed. The intruders are heading toward the Great Circle." "How many?" Magnus's voice had changed completely. Now it was the commander speaking, cold and calculating. "At least 20, perhaps more hidden in the forest. Evacuate the ceremony. Take everyone to the underground refuge. The warriors prepare for confrontation." "And what about her?" Dominic's question came loaded with barely disguised distrust. She felt Magnus's hesitation, divided between his duty as protector of the pack and his desire to keep her safe. "I will go with the others," she offered, trying to sound braver than she felt. "No." The firmness in his voice left no room for arguments. "Aria stays with me." "Your Majesty," protested Dominic. "With all due respect, she will be a burden during battle. She cannot fight. She cannot even run properly." A low growl emanated from Magnus's chest, making the beta instinctively back away. "She is my chosen and the last seer. If the Devourers are here, they've come for her, and I will not leave her unprotected." "Seer?" The incredulity in Dominic's voice was palpable. "But she's blind. How can she be a seer?" "We don't have time for explanations," Magnus cut him off. "Fulfill your orders. Protect the pack." Aria heard Dominic move away, still murmuring in disbelief. In the distance, screams began to replace music and laughter. Panic was spreading. "Magnus!" she called, using his name for the first time. "I cannot stay with you. I'll be a burden." Dominic is right. His hands gripped her shoulders firmly. "Listen to me carefully, Aria. They came for you, even if you haven't awakened yet." "If they capture me, what would happen?" she asked, fear growing within her. "They would drain your essence, your gift, your very soul." His voice trembled slightly. "And you would become one of them, a monster without light." The horror of the revelation left her speechless. It wasn't just her life at risk, but her very existence. "How can I fight against something like this? I cannot even see my enemies." Magnus held her face between his hands. "Trust me. Trust yourself. There is more power in you than you have ever imagined." His fingers touched the moonstone pendant. "This crystal is not just a memento. It is a key to your true potential." "I don't know how to use it," she confessed, despair growing along with the sounds of conflict that were approaching. "The wisdom will come when it is needed," he said, an unwavering certainty in his voice. "Now we need to move." Magnus intertwined his fingers with hers, and they began to run through the forest. Despite her blindness, she followed his rhythm with a confidence she had never felt before. It was as if somehow she could anticipate every route, every stone in their path. They ran for several minutes, breath burning in her lungs. The sounds of fighting were becoming more distant, but a new sensation began to grow within her, a disturbing tingling at the base of her neck. "Stop," she whispered, pulling Magnus's hand. He obeyed instantly, surprising her. "What is it?" "We are not alone," she murmured, uncertain how she knew this. "There is someone there." She pointed to the right, guided by a perception that didn't come from any of her known senses. The tense silence that followed was broken by slow, mocking applause echoing among the trees. "Impressive," a male voice, smooth as velvet and cold as ice, emerged from the darkness. "The blind girl has the gift, after all, exactly as we suspected." Magnus moved in front of her, his body a protective barrier. A deep growl vibrated in his chest, the sound of a supreme predator, ready to kill. "Corvus," Magnus spat, the name loaded with hatred. "What a warm welcome for someone who has traveled a long way just to meet your new bride, my dear cousin." The voice responded with false cordiality. Cousin. Magnus had never mentioned having a living relative, and by the tone with which they addressed each other, there was a dark history between them. "She is under my protection," declared Magnus, his voice carrying the weight of his alpha power. "Touch her, and it will be the last thing you do." A cold laugh echoed among the trees. She felt more presences approaching, surrounding them. "Always so territorial," Corvus taunted. "But this time, cousin, you've claimed the wrong prize. The girl belongs to the Devourers now." "Why?" she managed to ask, her voice firmer than expected. "Why are you hunting people like me?" A moment of silence, then soft footsteps approached. Magnus tensed even more in front of her. "She speaks," observed Corvus, sounding genuinely surprised, "and asks interesting questions." "Tell me, little seer, what do you know about balance?" "Don't answer him," Magnus ordered. But something in the question awakened a distant memory, words of her grandmother echoing through time. "The balance between light and darkness," she murmured, the words coming from somewhere deep within her. "Between seeing and being blind, between power and wisdom." A heavy silence followed her words. When Corvus spoke again, there was a new tone in his voice, something between admiration and caution. "She is more valuable than we imagined," he said. "Not just to us, but to your invisible followers. The last direct descendant of Lyra, the first seer." The name sent an electric current through her body. Lyra. Her grandmother had never mentioned that name, but somehow she knew it was true. A fragment of ancient memory, not hers, yet somehow part of her. "It doesn't matter who she is," growled Magnus. "You will not have her." "Ah, Magnus," sighed Corvus, "always so predictable, always ready to sacrifice everything for your precious ideals." His voice hardened. "Like you sacrificed our parents that night." The shock of the revelation hit her like a physical blow. Whatever had happened between them went far beyond simple rivalry. "You know it wasn't like that." Magnus's voice was laden with an old pain. "I tried to save them." "Tried?" Corvus spat the word. "You abandoned them. You chose your precious pack over your own family." The pendant on her neck began to heat against her skin, almost burning. A strange sensation spread throughout her body, as if veils were being lifted one by one from her perception. "And now," continued Corvus, his voice regaining the cold calculation, "I will take from you what you value most, your new pack, your crown, and your precious seer." The tension in the air was so dense it seemed to make breathing difficult. Magnus was about to attack. She could feel his energy accumulating like a storm about to break. "Aria," he whispered, so low that only she could hear. "When I attack, run to the east. Follow the sound of the stream. Serena will be waiting to take you to the refuge." "I won't leave you," she replied in the same tone. "You must go. It's you they want." "What an enchanting conversation," Corvus interrupted. "Planning a romantic escape? I fear it's too late for that." The pendant now burned against her skin, its energy pulsing in sync with her racing heart. Something was changing within her, a door opening to a power that had always been there, dormant. And then, like a wave breaking over rocks, it happened. The darkness that had been her constant companion for so many years began to transform. Not into normal vision, not colors or shapes emerging, but something much deeper. They were auras, energies, the true essence of the beings around her. Magnus shone like a golden sun beside her, strength, honor, and a protective ferocity radiating from him in waves. And before them, a presence so dark it seemed to absorb the very light. Corvus, a hungry void that consumed everything around him. "What is happening?" she whispered, stunned by the transformation. Magnus turned slightly to her, and she could see his expression of surprise. "Your eyes," he murmured. "They're glowing." The gift was awakening. In the moment of greatest danger, when all seemed lost, the last seer was finally beginning to see. "Interesting," Corvus's voice cut through the moment. "The crystal is activated. I can feel its power from here." Around Aria, the world had transformed. She didn't see with physical eyes, but perceived everything in layers of energy and intention. The trees pulsed with tranquil green life. Forest animals emitted small flashes of fear and curiosity from the shadows, and the Devourers, there were at least 10 surrounding them, were walking black holes, sucking vital energy from their surroundings. "Magnus," she whispered, "I can see them all." His surprise was palpable, but there was no time for explanations. "4 on the right," she continued quickly. 3 on the left, 2 behind us. And him—" her voice faltered as she perceived the true nature of what stood before them. "Corvus is not like the others. He's emptier." Magnus nodded almost imperceptibly, his golden aura now mixed with intense red. Preparation for battle. "The girl awakens before our eyes," observed Corvus, his voice carrying a sick excitement. "Magnificent. Her power will be even more delicious when drained." She felt Magnus tense beside her, ready to attack. But before he could move, she touched his arm, stopping him. "Wait," she requested, an inexplicable certainty guiding her words. "Aria, trust me," Magnus interrupted, but she held firm. "How touching," Corvus laughed, the sound devoid of any real joy. The great Alpha King being restrained by a blind Omega. "I'm not blind," she responded, stepping forward. Fear still coursed through her veins, but something stronger overshadowed it, a clarity she had never experienced. "I can see you, Corvus, what you truly are." His dark aura wavered, a flash of uncertainty breaking his perfect void. "What am I, little seer?" he asked, a slight tremor in his voice betraying his false confidence. "A whole, A void, a being who has lost so much of himself that now needs to steal others' essence to continue existing. Corvus advanced a step, his dark energy dangerously undulating. "Be careful with your words, girl. You know nothing about me." "I know more than you imagine," she replied, the words flowing as if someone else pronounced them through her. "I know you and Magnus were inseparable as children. I know your parents died in the great fire of the ancient forest, and I know you blame Magnus for not saving them, though he nearly died trying." The shock emanated from both men. Magnus had never told her this story, and Corvus clearly didn't expect her to know these details. "Tricks," Corvus began, but Magnus interrupted him with a bitter laugh. "She's using information you must have shared with her," Corvus accused. "I never spoke about this with anyone," Magnus replied, his voice low, "much less with Aria." Her mind was flooded with images, not her memories, but visions of the past. 2 boys running through the forest, flames consuming cabins, screams, a young Magnus dragging an unconscious Corvus away from the fire, his own body covered with burns as a cabin collapsed over their parents. "You weren't conscious," she spoke directly to Corvus. "Magnus carried you out of the fire. He tried to go back for your parents, but it was too late. The roof had collapsed." Corvus's dark energy trembled violently. "Lies!" "The truth hurts more than any physical wound, doesn't it?" she continued, taking another step toward him, despite Magnus's silent warning. "That's why you chose to believe the lie, because the truth would mean you wasted decades consumed by hatred for nothing." "Enough!" roared Corvus. His human form began to distort, elongating, transforming into something that was neither wolf nor man, but an abomination between the 2 worlds. The other Devourers followed his example, their black auras expanding like ink spilled in water. "Aria, get back!" Magnus pushed her behind him, his own transformation beginning, gold and red merging into a storm of power. But the pendant on her neck burned like a star against her skin. Images, words, ancient knowledge flooded her mind, the collective wisdom of generations of seers flowing through time to her. "The Devourers cannot be defeated by force," she murmured, understanding clearing her mind. "They feed on conflict, on anger, on fear. The more we fight, the stronger they become." "Then how do we defeat them?" asked Magnus, containing his transformation. Before she could answer, Corvus attacked, not physically, but with a wave of black energy that advanced like a dark tide toward them. The other Devourers followed their leader, their empty essences forming a tsunami of darkness. By instinct, Aria raised the moonstone pendant. Its latent energies, accumulated over generations, erupted in a stream of silver light that collided with the advancing darkness. The 2 forces clashed in the space between them, creating a whirlwind of light and shadow. She felt her energy being quickly drained. The Devourer's power was immense, fueled by countless lives stolen over the centuries. "I can't hold for long," she gasped, her knees weakening. Magnus held her, his arm firm around her waist. "What can I do? Tell me how to help." The answer came not as words, but as an absolute certainty blossoming in her mind. "Your power," she whispered. "I need your power, but not to fight, to heal." Their gazes met. She couldn't see him in the traditional sense, but perceived every nuance of his essence, every thought crossing his mind, the trust, the fear, and something deeper, more vulnerable. "How?" "Give me your hand." Without hesitation, Magnus intertwined his fingers with hers. The moment they connected, she felt his strength flow into her, not diminishing his, but amplifying her own. Slowly, focusing on the pendant and the energies now blending between them, she began to walk toward the barrier of light and darkness. Each step was a struggle, like walking against a powerful current. "What are you doing?" Corvus growled from the other side of the barrier, for the first time demonstrating genuine uncertainty. "What my ancestors should have done centuries ago," she replied, her voice strangely calm amid the chaos of energies around them. "Restore balance." When they reached the barrier, the pain was immediate and overwhelming, like 1,000 needles piercing every inch of her skin. Magnus let out a grunt beside her, but didn't release her hand. Together, they crossed through the curtain of conflicting energies. On the other side, Corvus stepped back, disbelief emanating from his fragmented aura. "Impossible," he hissed. "No one can cross our barrier and remain intact." "No ordinary wolf could," she agreed, continuing to advance. "But we are not ordinary." The other Devourers began to retreat, confused and alarmed, but Corvus maintained his position, the darkness around him intensifying. "Stay away from me, witch," he warned, his hands transforming into monstrous claws, "or I'll tear out your heart while it still beats." She stopped just a few steps from him. The negative energy emanating from his being was almost unbearable. Centuries of hatred, pain, and emptiness amalgamated into a single entity. "Your heart still beats, Corvus," she said softly, buried beneath layers of darkness, "but it's still there." "I have no heart," he growled, "nor soul, nothing you can save." "Everyone can be saved," she replied, raising her free hand toward him. "Even you." "Aria, no," Magnus warned, trying to pull her back. But it was too late. Her fingers touched Corvus's chest, exactly over where his heart should be. The explosion of energy was instantaneous and blinding. An indescribable pain shot through her body as Corvus's darkness tried to consume her. But the moonstone pendant shone with renewed intensity, and Magnus's strength flowed constantly through their connection. Visions flooded her mind, not of the future, but of Corvus's past. The frightened boy watching his village burn, the orphaned youth convinced he had been abandoned. The man transforming his pain into revenge, sacrificing pieces of his own soul until almost nothing remained of the boy he once was. "I see you," she whispered through the pain. "The real you, the one Magnus tried to save." "Stop!" Corvus's voice oscillated between anger and plea. "You know nothing." "I know you believed the lie because the truth was unbearable," she continued, her voice weakening as the darkness continued to fight against her light. "That it was easier to hate Magnus than to accept that some tragedies have no culprits." Corvus's body trembled under her touch. Black tears began to stream down his distorted face. "He should have died with me," he whispered, his voice almost childlike. "We should have stayed together as we promised." "He almost died for you," she replied gently, "and has carried that guilt for decades. Both of you are prisoners of the same fire, just in different cells." The connection between the three intensified. Magnus, her, and Corvus, united by a thread of energy that transcended the physical. Through this thread, memories and emotions flowed freely, breaking down barriers built over years. "I'm sorry." Magnus's voice broke the silence, laden with an old pain. "I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to save them, Corvus." A sob escaped Corvus, shaking his monstrous form. The darkness around him began to oscillate, cracks of light appearing through the void. "It wasn't your fault." The words escaped him as if they were torn from his soul. "It never was." In that moment, something broke. The shell of hatred and bitterness that Corvus had built over decades began to crumble. The darkness that consumed him receded, not completely, but enough to reveal glimpses of the man he could have been. The other Devourers screamed in agony and confusion. Without the anchoring of their leader's power, their own essences began to destabilize. "What's happening to them?" asked Magnus, observing the Devourers writhing. "They exist in symbiosis," she explained, the knowledge naturally flowing to her consciousness. "Corvus held them together. Without him, they are just lost fragments." One by one, the Devourers began to dissolve, not into death, but into transformation. The essences they had stolen over the years escaped like sparks of light, returning to the universe. Corvus fell to his knees, his body slowly returning to human form. When he raised his face, there was no longer the complete void she had perceived before, just a broken man, with a small flame of life rekindling inside him. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice hoarse and uncertain. "The fight is," she replied, stumbling slightly as the adrenaline began to diminish. "The rest depends on you, Magnus supported her before she fell, his strong arms protectively enveloping her. He looked at his cousin, not with hatred or triumph, but with a mixture of sadness and hope. "You have a choice now, Corvus," said Magnus. For the first time in decades, Corvus looked at his own hands, as if truly seeing them for the first time. "I don't know how to live without the hatred. It defined me for so long." "You'll learn," she replied, feeling a strange compassion for the man who had almost killed them. "Day by day, as we all do." Suddenly her knees gave out completely. The use of the newly awakened gift had drained her strength beyond the limit. Magnus caught her in his arms, holding her against his chest as if she were made of crystal. "We need to get her back," he said, concern tinging his voice. "She used too much energy." "The pack," she murmured, fighting against the darkness that now approached for a very different reason. "Exhaustion." "Are they safe?" "They are," Magnus assured her. "The main attack was just a distraction. The real target was always you." She tried to respond, but her consciousness was slipping. The last thing she felt were Magnus's lips against her forehead and his soft words. "Rest, my queen. You saved us all." When she awoke, she was lying in a soft bed, covered with warm furs. The scent of medicinal herbs and fresh pine filled the air, but it was another smell that made her smile instantly: musk, burnt wood, and something wild. "Magnus, how long?" she asked, sensing his presence nearby. 3 days, he replied, his voice exhausted but relieved. "You gave us quite a scare, little wolf." She tried to sit up, and his hands gently helped her. The world around her was still a tapestry of energies and auras, not of traditional colors and shapes, but now she could control this perception better, focusing it or diminishing it according to her will. "Are my eyes still glowing?" she asked, touching her face. "Yes," he replied, a smile in his voice, "like twin moons in a night sky. It's extraordinary." She touched the moonstone pendant, still hanging around her neck. It felt different now, lighter, as if part of its ancestral energy had been released and now resided within her. The pack, she suddenly remembered. How did they react? Magnus sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. Let's say seeing their blind Omega confront an army of Devourers and save everyone changed some opinions. A hesitant smile touched her lips. Even Valeria's? His laugh was a comforting sound. Well, some may need more time to be convinced, but even the elders are calling you the seer now, with due respect. And Corvus? A brief silence followed her question. He's recovering. The process will be long. Decades of darkness don't dissolve in days, but there is hope. She nodded, understanding. Some wounds needed generations to fully heal. And what about us? She finally asked, gathering courage for the question that mattered most. What happens now? Magnus took her hands in his touch sending that same current of energy through her body. That depends on you, he replied, his voice more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. I chose you at the ceremony because we needed your strength, yes, but also because in all those years watching you from a distance, admiring your courage and resilience, I fell in love with the woman I saw when no one else was looking. Her heart raced. It wasn't just the declaration that moved her, but the absolute truth she perceived in his aura. There was no manipulation, no strategy, just a man exposing his heart despite the fear of rejection. You don't really know me, she whispered, though she desperately wanted to believe his words. I know enough, he replied, moving closer. And I want to know the rest, if you'll allow me. Every secret, every dream, every scar. Not as a king knows his queen, but as a soul knows its equal. Tears burned in her transformed eyes. For all her life she had been defined by her limitations, by what she lacked. Now, for the first time, someone saw her for who she truly was, not despite her difference, but with it, through it. It won't be easy, she warned, thinking of the challenges they would still face. The pack, the traditions, my new gift, all this will complicate our lives. Magnus laughed softly. We just faced an army of ancient monsters, and you're worried about pack politics? She couldn't contain a smile. His hands touched her face with reverence, mapping each feature as he had done that first night. But now there was no urgency, only discovery and admiration. "Aria, daughter of Helena," his voice was laden with emotion, "would you do me the honor of becoming my mate, not because tradition demands it, but because we choose each other?" Through her new vision, she could perceive the true beauty of his soul. Strong, yes, but also gentle. Powerful, but aware of his responsibilities. Wounded, but still capable of loving deeply. Her answer came without hesitation, born not from duty or hierarchy, but from a heart that had finally found its equal. "Yes," she whispered, leaning toward him. "I choose you, Magnus." When his lips found hers, it was as if the final pieces of an ancient puzzle finally fit together. The moonstone pendant glowed between them, no longer a symbol of power or magic, but a testimony that sometimes darkness is not the end of vision, but the beginning of a completely new way of seeing. Outside, the pack awaited them. A world of challenges and new possibilities opened before them. But in that moment, embraced by the man who had chosen her when she didn't yet know her own worth, she understood the truth her grandmother had tried to teach her all those years ago. True vision never depended on the eyes, and sometimes we need to lose ourselves in darkness to finally find our light. But their peace was short-lived. A light knock on the door broke the moment. Magnus reluctantly pulled away, his golden aura pulsing with both happiness and annoyance at the interruption. "Enter," he commanded, his voice regaining some of its authoritative tone. The door opened, and Aria recognized Serena's soft blue energy signature even before she spoke. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," Serena began, her voice carrying an urgency that immediately put Aria on alert. "The elders have gathered in the council chamber. They are demanding to see both of you immediately." Magnus's aura darkened slightly with frustration. "Tell them we'll come when Aria has fully recovered." "I'm afraid they were most insistent," Serena replied. "Elder Alara said it concerns the safety of the entire pack, and—" She hesitated. "And what?" Magnus prompted. "Valeria is there, with her father. They've brought formal accusations against Aria." Aria felt Magnus's anger flare, his aura taking on dangerous red streaks. "On what grounds?" he growled. "They're claiming she used forbidden magic during the battle, that the power she displayed isn't the traditional gift of the Seers, but something darker." Serena's voice lowered. "They're suggesting she might be tainted by the Devourers herself." Aria gasped. The accusation was as serious as it was absurd. Such claims could lead to exile, or worse. "I'll tear their throats out," Magnus snarled, half rising from the bed. "No," Aria said firmly, grabbing his arm. "Violence will only prove their point." She turned towards Serena's energy signature. "Tell the council we'll be there shortly." After Serena left, Magnus helped Aria to her feet. Her body still felt weak, but a newfound determination strengthened her. "They fear what they don't understand," she said softly. "But I won't hide anymore." Magnus regarded her with a mixture of pride and concern. "These are dangerous waters, Aria. The old laws concerning magic are brutal. If they judge you guilty of dark practices—" "Then I'll face that judgment with dignity," she interrupted. "But I won't start our new life together by running from challenges." Magnus gently took her face between his hands. "You continuously surprise me, little wolf. I've led armies into battle, yet I'm not sure I possess the kind of courage you show right now." She smiled and placed her hand over his heart. "Different kinds of strength for different kinds of battles." When they entered the council chamber, Aria immediately felt the wave of conflicting energies. The large circular room was filled with members of the pack, their auras forming a kaleidoscope of colors and emotions: fear, curiosity, respect, and in some cases, open hostility. The 7 elders sat in a semicircle at the far end. In the center sat Elder Orion, his aura a rigid blue-gray structure that spoke of inflexibility and tradition. To his right was Elder Ilara, the oldest female in the pack, whose energy surprised Aria, Unlike the others, hers was a warm, knowing purple that seemed to reach out toward her in welcome. Standing before the elders were Dominic and Valeria. Dominic's aura was conflicted, layers of amber duty and protocol covering what seemed like genuine concern. But Valeria's energy made Aria recoil. A bitter green cloud shot through with venomous yellow spikes of hatred and jealousy. The room fell silent as Magnus guided Aria forward, his hand possessively at the small of her back. The Alpha King and his chosen grace us with their presence at last. Elder Orion's voice was dry with barely concealed sarcasm. Magnus didn't take the bait. Instead, he helped Aria to the center of the room and then stood beside her, their shoulders touching in a display of unity. "We come when summoned by the council," Magnus replied evenly, "though I question the need for such urgency when Aria is still recovering from saving all your lives." A murmur ran through the crowd. Valeria stepped forward, her aura pulsating with malice. "Is that what you think she did? Save us?" Her voice rose. "Or did she bring the darkness upon us in the first place?" Magnus tensed beside Aria, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. "What exactly am I being accused of, Valeria?" Aria asked, keeping her voice steady. "The forbidden merger," Dominic answered instead of his daughter. "During the battle, witnesses claim you absorbed the darkness from the Devourer leader instead of destroying it. Such actions are explicitly forbidden by the ancient laws." "She healed him," Magnus countered. "She didn't absorb anything." "Then how do you explain her new abilities?" Valeria demanded. "The eyes that glow like moonlight? The power to see without seeing? These are not the traditional gifts of the Seers of old." "You speak of traditions you know nothing about." A new voice entered the conversation. Elder Alara rose from her seat, her ancient form somehow majestic despite her years. "I have spent my life studying the old texts, the histories that most have forgotten." Her gaze swept the room. What Aria displayed was indeed the true gift of the Seers, not just the ability to perceive events across time, but to see the very essence of souls, to heal what is broken. "Preposterous," Elder Orion scoffed. "The Seers were simply prophets, nothing more." "That is the simplified tale we tell the pups," Alara replied sharply. "The truth is far more complex and has been hidden for generations, deliberately so." She moved to stand beside Aria, reaching out to touch the moonstone pendant. "This crystal is proof of her lineage and her right. It has awakened fully for the first time in centuries." She turned to face the council. "I move that all charges against Aria be dismissed. Not only has she done nothing wrong, but she has fulfilled the ancient prophecy by returning the gift of true sight to our pack." Valeria's aura flared with rage. "She bewitched the king. She consorts with our enemies. How can we trust someone who communicates with the Devourers?" "Enough!" Magnus's voice thundered through the chamber, his alpha power making the very air vibrate. Several wolves automatically lowered their heads in submission. "I have tolerated this farce out of respect for our traditions, but my patience has limits." He stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. "Aria is my chosen mate. Any attack on her is an attack on me, and by extension, on the pack itself." The threat hung in the air, clear and unambiguous. Dominic cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Your Majesty, we mean no disrespect, but these are unprecedented times. The pack needs reassurance that its future queen is untainted." Aria felt a shift in the room's energy. Behind the accusations lay a deeper fear, the unknown, the change she represented. She realized that words alone would not sway them. She needed to demonstrate the true nature of her gift. Gently breaking away from Magnus, she walked toward Valeria, who instinctively backed away. "Stay back," Valeria warned, her hand moving to the knife at her belt. Aria stopped a few paces from her. "You have hated me for years, Valeria. Not because I've ever harmed you, but because you fear what I represent." "And what's that?" Valeria sneered, though her aura flickered with uncertainty. "The possibility that strength comes in many forms, that the hierarchy you cling to so desperately might not be as fixed as you believe." Aria's voice remained calm, conversational even, but it carried throughout the silent chamber. Your greatest fear isn't that I'll harm the pack, she continued. It's that I'll change it. That an Omega, a blind girl whom you've tormented for years, might stand beside the Alpha King as an equal. Valeria's aura contracted defensively. You know nothing of my fears. I know you were 12 when your mother died in childbirth, Aria said softly. I know you blame yourself because you were supposed to fetch the healer sooner. I know you've spent every day since trying to be perfect, to never fail again, to make your father proud enough to fill the void she left. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Valeria's face drained of color, her aura fluctuating wildly between rage and naked pain. How could you possibly? She began, her voice breaking. Because I can see you, Valeria. Not your face, not your physical form, but your soul, your pain, your fear. Aria extended her hand, palm up, a gesture of peace. I don't want to be your enemy. I never did. The room had gone completely still. Even Magnus seemed transfixed by the exchange. Is this the darkness you fear? Aria addressed the council, turning slowly to face them all. The ability to see truth, to understand pain, to heal rather than destroy? Elder Alara's aura pulsed with approval, while the other elders shifted uncomfortably. The old texts speak of a time of change, Alara said into the silence, when the Seer and the Wolf King would bring balance to what was broken. Perhaps instead of fearing this change, we should embrace it. Elder Orion scowled, but before he could speak, a commotion at the chamber entrance drew everyone's attention. Thane, Magnus's most trusted warrior, burst through the doors, his aura a flashing alarm of urgent news. Your Majesty, he called, breathing heavily as if he had run all the way. The Northern Pack has arrived at our borders, along with representatives from the Eastern. They demand an audience. Magnus's surprise was evident in his aura's sudden shift. The Northern Pack hasn't sent emissaries in a decade, he said, frowning. What do they want? They say they've come to see the Seer, Thane replied, his eyes moving to Aria. Word of what happened with the Devourers has spread. They say their oracles predicted her arrival. They call her the Bridge Between Worlds. A stunned silence fell over the council chamber. Whatever accusations Valeria and the elders had planned suddenly seemed trivial in the face of this unexpected development. Aria felt a strange calm settle over her. The pendant around her neck warmed slightly, as if responding to the title. The Bridge Between Worlds, she repeated softly. The words felt right, resonating with something deep within her. Magnus moved to her side, taking her hand firmly in his. It seems our challenges have only just begun, he murmured for her ears alone. She squeezed his hand in return. Together, she whispered. She. He nodded, then turned to address the council, his voice ringing with authority. This council is adjourned. Prepare to receive our guests. His eyes fell on Valeria, who still stood frozen in shock. All accusations against my chosen mate are dismissed. From this day forward, she will be recognized by her proper title, Aria, Royal Seer, and future Queen of the United Packs. The declaration sent a wave of energy through the room. Shock, excitement, and for many, a new respect. As they left the chamber, Aria sensed a shift in the pack's collective energy. Fear remained, yes, but also curiosity, and most importantly, hope. For the first time in generations, something was changing in their rigid world. Outside, in the great courtyard, she could already sense the gathering of unfamiliar auras, the approaching delegations from the other packs, drawn by news of her awakening. Are you ready for this? Magnus asked, as they paused at the entrance to their quarters. Aria took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moonstone pendant against her skin, the power it represented, the responsibility it entailed. No, she admitted with a small smile, but I don't think anyone ever is, when destiny comes calling. Magnus laughed softly and pressed his forehead against hers in a gesture of profound intimacy. Then we'll face it unprepared together. And in that moment, surrounded by the swirling energies of a world in flux, Aria felt truly seen for the first time in her life, not despite her differences, but because of them. The blind Omega had become the one who could see what others couldn't, guiding them all toward a future that no prophecy had fully described. The pack ceremony, which had started as her greatest fear, had become the beginning of her true awakening, and whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Magnus by her side, their strengths intertwined like the light and darkness they had navigated together. The moonstone glowed softly against her skin, a quiet reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as our deepest wounds. And sometimes those who seem the weakest turn out to be the ones who can see the way forward when all others are blind. The delegations from the northern and eastern packs arrived with the formality of ancient tradition. Aria stood beside Magnus on the great terrace, her new vision allowing her to see the approaching wolves not as physical forms, but as intricate tapestries of energy, each unique, each telling its own story. The northern pack moved with disciplined precision, their auras predominantly cool blues and steely grays, reflecting their harsh mountain upbringing. Leading them was an older wolf with an aura of deep midnight blue shot through with silver, steady, powerful, but with an unexpected softness at its core. Alpha Rorik of the northern mountains, Magnus murmured for her benefit. He hasn't left his territory in 15 years. And behind them came the eastern pack, smaller in number but their energies burning brighter, oranges and golds that spoke of passion and creativity. Their leader's aura was a complex swirl of amber and copper, vibrant yet contained. And that is Alpha Isolde of the eastern forests, Magnus continued. She took leadership after her father's death in the Unification Wars. Aria felt a flicker of unease. The Eastern Pack had been her family's home before the wars that united the territories under Magnus's rule, before she lost her sight and her parents in a single night of fire and blood. "They do not come seeking vengeance," she whispered, reading the energies, "but they do seek answers." Magnus squeezed her hand in silent acknowledgement as the delegations came to a halt before them. The courtyard had filled with members of their own pack, all watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Alpha Rorik stepped forward first, his physical appearance matching his energy, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked black hair and piercing blue eyes. He inclined his head slightly to Magnus. The bare minimum of respect one alpha would show another. "Magnus, King of the United Packs," he greeted, his voice deep and resonant. "We come on a matter of grave importance." "So I've been told," Magnus replied evenly. "You've traveled far to see my chosen mate." Rorik's eyes shifted to Aria, widening slightly as he took in her glowing eyes. "The rumors are true, then," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "The Seers have returned." Alpha Isolde moved forward, her copper hair catching the sunlight. Her physical beauty matched the vibrancy of her aura, but Aria could see the steel beneath the warmth. "We have come because the signs cannot be ignored," Isolde stated, her voice melodic yet authoritative. 3 nights ago, as the Devourers were defeated, every oracle and dreamwalker in our territories awoke screaming the same words. "The bridge rises, the storm approaches." A murmur ran through the assembled wolves. Magnus remained outwardly impassive, but Aria felt his aura pulse with concern. "And you believe these visions refer to Aria?" he asked. "We know they do," Rorik responded firmly. "Our eldest oracle described her exactly. The blind wolf with seeing eyes, the Omega who stands beside the Alpha King, the last daughter of the ancient line of Lyra." The mention of that name, the first seer, her ancestor, sent a tremor through Aria's pendant, a resonance that traveled up through her chest and into her mind. Unbidden, a memory not her own surfaced, a woman with starlight in her eyes, surrounded by the first wolf packs, bringing peace where there had been only bloodshed. "You should know," Isolde added, her gaze fixed on Aria, "that in the Eastern Territories, the emergence of a true seer has always been seen as both blessing and warning. The gift only awakens fully when great danger approaches." "The Devourers have been defeated," Magnus stated, though Aria could sense the question beneath his certainty. Rorik's aura darkened slightly. "Have they? Our scouts report that while many dissolved after your battle, Others fled deeper into the shadows. And there are disturbances at the borders of our territories. Strange energies that our most sensitive pack members can feel but not identify. Elder Alara stepped forward from where she had been quietly observing, her ancient form somehow more vital than it had appeared in the council chamber. "We should continue this discussion in the great hall," she suggested, her eyes sweeping the crowded courtyard. "Some matters are not for all ears." Magnus nodded his agreement and with a gesture invited the Alpha leaders to follow. As they moved through the crowd, Aria noticed Valeria standing with her father. Unlike earlier, Valeria's aura had shifted. The venomous spikes had withdrawn, leaving behind a conflicted swirl of teal and amber. Their eyes met briefly, and Aria felt something unexpected from the Beta's daughter, not acceptance, not yet, but a fragile, reluctant curiosity. The great hall had been prepared for the meeting, with the central fire pit blazing and the ancient round table, carved from a single massive tree trunk centuries ago, ready to receive them. Magnus guided Aria to a seat beside his own, while the visiting Alphas took their places. Elders Alara and Orion represented their pack's council, along with Dominic as Chief Beta. Thane stood guard at the doorway, his vigilant energy focused outward. "Now," Magnus began once all were seated, "speak plainly. What exactly do your oracles foresee?" Isolde and Rorik exchanged glances before Isolde reached into a leather pouch at her belt. She withdrew a small object wrapped in silk and placed it on the table. "First, we bring this. It was found in our ancestral vault 3 days ago, glowing as if awakened." She unwrapped the silk to reveal a small crystalline object similar to Aria's pendant, but shaped differently. Where hers was a smooth oval, this was a jagged point, like a miniature mountain peak. Aria gasped as she perceived its energy, identical to her pendant, the same silvery white light pulsing at its core. "There are 3, Elder Alara whispered, her eyes wide with recognition. "The text spoke of them, but I never thought—" "3 what?" Magnus demanded, looking between Alara and the crystal. 3 moonstones, Rorik answered, pulling a third crystal from inside his fur-lined coat. This one shaped like a perfect teardrop. 1 for each of the original packs. 1 for sight, 1 for strength, and 1 for spirit. As the 3 stones lay on the table, Aria felt her pendant grow warm against her skin, pulling toward the others as if they were magnets seeking to reunite. "The legends say they were 1 stone originally," Alara explained, her voice taking on the rhythm of a storyteller. "Given to the first wolf packs by the moon herself when humans began hunting our kind to extinction. The stone was broken into 3 pieces and given to 3 champions, the seer, the warrior, and the healer. Together, they led our ancestors to safety and established the first territories. And now they've awakened again," Isolde said grimly, "which means the threat our ancestors faced has returned in some form." "What threat?" Magnus pressed. "The Devourers?" Rorik shook his head. "The Devourers are but symptoms of a deeper darkness. Our oldest scrolls speak of something our ancestors called the Storm of Unmaking, a force that does not merely kill, but erases. It corrupts the natural world, turns creatures against their own kind, and if unchecked, leaves nothing behind but void." A chill ran down Aria's spine as the description resonated with something she had sensed within Corvus, the emptiness that had consumed him, the void that had nearly taken her when she touched him. "I've seen it," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Not the storm itself, but its touch. It's what transformed ordinary wolves into devourers. It hollows them out, removes everything that makes them themselves, and leaves only hunger behind. "Can it be fought?" Magnus asked, his aura hardening with determination. "Can it be defeated?" "Not through conventional means," Isolde replied. "The scrolls are clear on this. Strength alone cannot prevail against it. That's why the 3 stones were created, why the 3 champions were chosen. Different kinds of power, working in concert." Aria's mind raced, connecting fragments of visions and memories that had been filtering through her consciousness since her awakening. We need to find the third stone's bearer, she realized aloud. Sight, strength, and spirit. I carry sight, but who carries spirit? Alara's aged fingers traced patterns on the ancient table. In the old stories, the healer was always the hardest to find, for their gift manifests differently, not in grand displays of power or prophetic visions, but in small, quiet moments of connection and restoration. How long do we have? Magnus asked the visiting alphas. How quickly does this storm approach? Rorik's expression was grim. Our oracles cannot say precisely, but the signs suggest months rather than years. Already, there are reports of animals behaving strangely at the farthest edges of our territories. Prey animals attacking without provocation, plants withering overnight with no apparent cause. And there have been disappearances, Isolde added reluctantly. Lone wolves who venture too far into the borderlands and never return. Magnus's hand clenched into a fist on the table. We'll need to organize patrols, establish warning systems, prepare safe havens for the vulnerable. With respect, Alpha King, Rorik interrupted, fortification alone will not save us. The storm cannot be walled out or fought off. It must be countered at its source. And where is that? Dominic asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Unknown, Isolde admitted, but our oracles believe the seer may be able to locate it once her powers have fully matured. All eyes turned to Aria again. She felt the weight of their expectations, their hope and their fear, pressing against her like a physical force. I don't, she began, then stopped as the pendant grew suddenly hot against her skin. A vision overwhelmed her, not of the future, but of the distant past. She saw a vast, empty plain beneath a night sky where 3 moons hung impossibly close. A silver wolf with glowing eyes stood facing a writhing darkness that seemed to devour the stars themselves. Beside the wolf stood 2 others, one massive and battle-scarred, the other smaller, but surrounded by a corona of healing light. Together, they raised their voices in a howl that became a wave of pure energy, pushing back the darkness. The Valley of 3 Moons, she gasped as the vision released her. That's where it began, and that's where it must end. The Valley of 3 Moons is a myth, Elder Orion scoffed. A pup's bedtime story. No, Elder Alara countered. It was real, though its location has been lost to time. It lay at the convergence of the 3 original territories, before borders shifted and memories faded. Can you find it? Magnus asked Aria softly. She touched the pendant thoughtfully. Not yet, but I think as the stones come together, and as my gift strengthens, the way will become clear. Then our path forward is set, Rorik declared. We must unite our packs, find the third bearer, and locate the valley before the storm fully manifests. You speak of cooperation as if centuries of territorial disputes can be forgotten overnight, Orion said skeptically. They must be, Isolde replied firmly, or there will be no territories left to dispute. The discussion continued for hours as they debated practical matters. How many wolves from each pack would remain in a joint council, how information would be shared, how training and preparations would proceed. Throughout it all, Aria listened not just to words, but to the shifting energies around the table, the undercurrents of fear, hope, ambition, and determination that colored every decision. By the time the meeting concluded, night had fallen. The visiting alphas would remain as guests for several days to formalize their alliance, with messengers already dispatched to their home territories with preliminary instructions. As they left the great hall, Magnus drew Aria aside into a small alcove, his aura swirling with concern and something deeper, a fierce, protective love that both warmed and startled her. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. This is a heavy burden to place on someone who only discovered her gifts days ago. She leaned into his solid presence, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of the responsibility, but of failing. So many lives depending on abilities I barely understand, powers I can't fully control." Magnus wrapped his arms around her, his chin resting on top of her head. "You won't be alone," he promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together." A soft footfall interrupted the moment. They turned to see Elder Alara approaching, her ancient form somehow lighter than it had appeared earlier, as if a long-carried burden had been set down. "Forgive the intrusion," she said, her milky eyes finding Aria unerringly, despite her advanced age. "But there are things the young seer must know, things I've kept hidden for too long." Magnus tensed slightly, but gestured for the elder to continue. "You knew," Aria said, not accusingly, but with sudden clarity. "You knew who I was, what I might become, even before the ceremony." Alara nodded, her aura shifting to reveal layers of secrets kept for decades. "I was sworn to watch and wait, but never to interfere directly. Your grandmother made me promise before she died." "My grandmother? But she never—" "Helena knew more than she ever revealed to you," Alara said gently. "She was not a full seer herself, but she carried enough of the gift to recognize it in you, even when you were an infant. She came to me in secret after your parents were killed, made me swear to keep knowledge of your lineage hidden until the time was right." "Why?" Aria asked, the revelation sending ripples through her understanding of her past. "Why hide it for so long?" "Protection," Alara replied simply. "The last time a true seer emerged, dark forces sought to destroy them before their powers could fully manifest. Your grandmother believed the same would happen to you." "And she was right," Magnus said grimly. "The Devourers came for Aria almost immediately after she displayed her gift." "There is more you need to know," Alara continued, drawing a worn leather pouch from her robes. "This belonged to your grandmother. She entrusted it to me with instructions to give it to you when your gift awakened." She placed the pouch in Aria's hands. Inside, Aria found a small, leather-bound book, its pages brittle with age. "Her journal," Alara explained, "containing everything she knew about the Seers, the storm, and the Valley of Three Moons. She spent her life gathering these fragments of knowledge, hoping they would serve you when the time came." Aria ran her fingers over the cover, feeling the energy of her grandmother's touch lingering in the weathered leather. "There's something else you should know," Alara added, her voice dropping to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "About the bearer of the Spirit Stone." Magnus and Aria leaned closer. "The healer's gift often manifests in those who have themselves been broken and mended," the elder explained. "Those who have known great pain and found their way back from darkness." "Corvus," Aria whispered, the realization striking her like lightning. Alara nodded gravely. "I believe so. His transformation has already begun. You started the process when you healed the rift in his soul. The Spirit Stone recognized him immediately. I saw its energy reach toward him even as he left our territory." "But he's gone," Magnus objected. "He left to recover from his ordeal, to atone." "He will return when needed," Alara said with quiet certainty. "The stones call to each other and to their bearers. As your powers grow, Aria, so will the connection between the three of you." A commotion from the direction of the Great Hall interrupted them. Thane appeared, his expression urgent. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there's a situation you need to address immediately." They followed him back to find a crowd gathered around someone at the center of the hall. As they approached, the wolves parted to reveal Serena kneeling beside a collapsed figure. A young male wolf Aria didn't recognize, his aura flickering weakly like a candle in strong wind. "He arrived just minutes ago," Thane explained rapidly. "A scout from the western borderlands. He ran for 3 days without stopping to bring news." Magnus knelt beside the exhausted wolf, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What news, soldier? Speak." The scout's eyes fluttered open, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Western Pass, completely overtaken. Black mist that moves against the wind. Every living thing it touches changes." He coughed weakly. "The outpost. Everyone gone. Only I escaped to warn." His voice failed as he slipped into unconsciousness, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. "Get him to the healers," Magnus ordered, rising to his feet. His aura had shifted to battle readiness, focused and formidable. He turned to find Rorik and Isolde already approaching, having heard the commotion. "The storm moves faster than we anticipated," Rorik said grimly. "We need to see for ourselves," Isolde added. "Send a joint scouting party to assess the situation." Magnus nodded sharply. "I'll lead it myself. We leave at dawn." "No," Aria said firmly, surprising herself as much as the others. "You cannot go to the Western Pass." Magnus turned to her, brow furrowed. "Aria, I must see this threat with my own eyes if I'm to lead our defenses." "The storm will be drawn to the stones," she interrupted, certain of this truth, though she couldn't explain how she knew it. "If you go near it now, before we've found Corvus, before we've located the valley, we risk accelerating its advance." The visiting alphas exchanged worried glances. "Is she certain?" Rorik asked. "The Seer speaks with the voice of the ancients," Alara confirmed. "We would be wise to heed her warning." Magnus studied Aria's face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll send Thane with a team of our strongest, along with representatives from the northern and eastern packs. They'll observe only, engage nothing, and return with detailed reports." As the leaders dispersed to organize the scouting party, Magnus drew Aria away from the crowd, his expression troubled. "If I cannot go to the border, then we must accelerate our plans here," he said in a low voice. "The training of your gifts, the search for Corvus, the location of the valley, all must proceed simultaneously." "I'll start with my grandmother's journal tonight," she promised. "There may be clues about how to develop my abilities faster, how to track the spirit bearer." He touched her face gently. "Don't push yourself too hard, too quickly. You're still recovering your strength." "There's no time for gradual recovery anymore," she replied, leaning into his touch. "The storm is coming, faster than anyone predicted. I can feel it, Magnus, a pressure building at the edges of my awareness, like the moment before lightning strikes." His aura flared with protective determination. "Then we'll be ready when it does," he vowed. "Together." As the hall emptied and preparations began throughout the compound, Aria clutched her grandmother's journal to her chest, feeling the weight of destiny settling more firmly upon her shoulders. 3 days ago, she had been a blind Omega, surviving on the margins of pack society. Now she stood at the center of an ancient prophecy, a brewing war, and an alliance that hadn't existed for centuries. The moonstone pendant pulsed against her skin, a steady reminder of powers still untapped, secrets still uncovered, and a battle that would determine the fate of all wolfkind. And somewhere out there, Corvus was beginning his own journey of transformation, from destroyer to healer, from enemy to essential ally. The storm gathered its strength in the darkness beyond their borders, but for the first time in generations, the forces that could oppose it were gathering too. Whether they would be enough remained to be seen, but Aria was determined that they would not fall without a fight. She opened the journal to its first page and began to read, letting her grandmother's words guide her into the unknown future that awaited them all. The dawn brought a flurry of activity to the compound as the joint scouting party prepared to depart for the Western Pass. Aria stood with Magnus on the terrace, watching the selected warriors gather. Thane moved among them, his confident aura radiating calm authority as he gave final instructions. Each scout carried minimal provisions. Speed would be essential for this mission. 3 days to reach the pass, 1 day to observe, 3 days to return, Magnus murmured, his energy fluctuating between concern and frustration at not leading the mission himself. Aria squeezed his hand. "Thane will see what needs to be seen. Your place is here now." The scouting party departed with little ceremony, slipping through the western gate like shadows in the early morning light. As they vanished into the forest, Aria felt a sudden chill, not from the cool morning air, but from a premonition that whispered through her newly awakened senses. Not all who left would return. She kept this foreboding to herself. There was already enough fear circulating through the compound without adding her unformed worries. "Come," Magnus said, drawing her attention back to the immediate tasks at hand. "Elder Alara is waiting for us in the ancient library." The ancient library occupied the oldest part of the compound, a circular stone chamber buried partially underground. The walls were lined with shelves containing scrolls, leather-bound volumes, and artifacts collected over centuries. The air carried the comforting scent of old parchment and protective herbs. Elder Elara sat at a round table in the center, surrounded by open texts. Her ancient hands moved with surprising dexterity as she arranged various documents. Beside her stood a young male wolf Aria didn't recognize, an omega by his energy signature, but one that pulsed with unexpected intelligence and quiet strength. "Ah, there you are," Elara greeted them. "I've begun compiling everything our archives contain about the Seers and the storm." She gestured to the young wolf beside her. "This is Kalen. He's been my assistant in the library for the past year. His knowledge of our oldest texts is unmatched." Kalen bowed respectfully, his aura flickering with nervous excitement at being in such close proximity to both the Alpha King and the newly revealed seer. "It's an honor," he said softly, his voice carrying the slight lilt of the southern territories. Aria sensed something familiar in his energy, a resonance she couldn't quite place, but that felt important somehow. "Kalen will help us organize our research," Elara continued. "Time is of the essence, and there are thousands of texts to search through." Magnus nodded his approval, then turned to Aria. "Did you find anything useful in your grandmother's journal?" Aria placed the small book on the table. She had spent most of the night reading by the light of a single candle, absorbing her grandmother's meticulous notes and observations. "Several things," she confirmed. First, she had been tracking the movements of the Devourers for decades, long before anyone else recognized the threat. She believed they were harbingers, early symptoms of the storm's approach. She opened the journal to a marked page. She also collected legends about the Valley of Three Moons from various pack territories. According to her notes, the valley doesn't exist in our physical world, at least not anymore. It's a place between worlds, accessible only under specific conditions. "What conditions?" Magnus asked, leaning closer to examine the journal. "A convergence," Aria explained. "When the three stones are united and their bearers have fully awakened to their gifts, a doorway opens during the night of the blood moon." "The blood moon," Elara breathed. "That's only 7 weeks away." Magnus's energy sharpened with urgency. 7 weeks to find Corvus, awaken your powers fully, and locate a mystical doorway to a place that may not even exist anymore. The odds are not in our favor. "Which is why we must work systematically," Elara said firmly. "Aria's training must begin immediately. The faster she masters her abilities, the sooner she can locate both Corvus and the valley." "How exactly does one train a seer?" Magnus asked, skepticism edging his voice. "With these," Elara replied, gesturing to Kalen, who carefully placed 3 ancient objects on the table: a crystal bowl filled with clear water, a circular mirror of polished obsidian, and a small wooden box containing what appeared to be carved bone tiles with strange symbols. "Scrying tools," Aria whispered, recognizing them from her grandmother's descriptions. "Precisely," Elara confirmed, "each designed to amplify different aspects of the seeing gift. The water for viewing distant places in the present, the mirror for glimpsing possible futures, and the bones for communicating with those who have passed beyond." "You believe Aria can speak with the dead?" Magnus asked, his aura rippling with disbelief. "Not precisely speaking with them," Elara clarified. "More, accessing the collective memory of our ancestors. The knowledge they carried doesn't truly die with them. It remains accessible to those with the gift." "Like my visions of the past," Aria realized. "Seeing events I never witnessed." "Yes, your gift allows you to move through time and space in ways others cannot. But like any ability, it requires practice and refinement." Aria reached for the crystal bowl, feeling its cool surface beneath her fingertips. The water inside trembled slightly at her touch, tiny ripples spreading outward. "We should begin with the water," Elara suggested. "Locating Corvus is our most urgent task." "I agree," Magnus said. "While you work on that, I'll meet with Rorik and Isolde to coordinate our defensive strategies. The pack must be prepared for whatever Thane's scouting party discovers." He touched Aria's shoulder briefly, his energy conveying both support and concern, then left them to their work. As the door closed behind him, Aria felt a momentary pang at his absence. His solid presence had become a grounding force in her rapidly changing world. "He carries a heavy burden," Alara observed, watching Aria's reaction. "Protecting 3 territories while preparing for a threat most cannot even comprehend. Your support gives him strength he didn't know he needed." Aria turned her attention back to the scrying bowl. "How do I begin?" "Center yourself first," Alara instructed. "Close your physical eyes. They'll only distract you now. Focus on your inner sight, the vision that awakened during your confrontation with Corvus." Aria did as instructed, closing her eyes and reaching for that other perception, the ability to see energies and essences rather than physical forms. Gradually, the world shifted around her, physical reality fading as the landscape of energy came into focus. "Good," Alara's voice seemed to come from far away. "Now place your hands on either side of the bowl. Think of Corvus, not his appearance, but his essence, the unique signature of his being that you witnessed during your connection." Aria recalled the complex, damaged aura she had perceived, the void at its center gradually filling with fragile light as healing began. She concentrated on that memory, trying to find its echo in the present. At first, nothing happened. The water remained still, reflecting only the stone ceiling above. Then, slowly, a ripple formed in the center of the bowl, spreading outward before reversing direction and flowing inward again. The water began to glow with a soft silver light, similar to her pendant, but paler, more diffuse. Images formed in the luminescent liquid, fragmented at first, then coalescing into a scene. A small clearing in an unfamiliar forest, a simple shelter built against a rocky hillside, and sitting before a meager fire, Corvus. His physical form looked haggard, thinner than when she had last seen him, but his aura had changed dramatically. The absolute void was gone, replaced by a complex swirl of deep purple and silver, shot through with threads of healing green light. Around his neck hung the teardrop-shaped moonstone. "He's accepted it," she whispered in wonder. "The stone of spirit." "Where is he?" Kaelin asked, his voice barely audible as if afraid to break her concentration. Aria tried to widen her perception, to see beyond the clearing to landmarks that might identify the location. The image in the water shifted, pulling back to reveal a broader view, a forest of ancient pines, a distant mountain range with distinctive twin peaks, and below, a river valley shrouded in mist. "The twin sentinels," Alara breathed. "He's in the forgotten forest, just beyond the northeastern border of our territory." 3 days' journey at least, Kaelin added, clearly familiar with the geography. The image in the water suddenly rippled violently, as if disturbed by a strong wind. Corvus's head snapped up, his expression alert, listening. He rose to his feet, tension evident in every line of his body. Then the water went dark, the connection broken. Aria gasped, pulling her hands away from the bowl as a sharp pain lanced through her temples. "What happened?" she asked, disoriented by the abrupt severing of the vision. Alara's face was grave. "He sensed you watching. His awareness of the connection broke your concentration." She paused, considering. "But there's something else. He appeared afraid, not of your presence, but of something nearby." "Could the Devourers have found him?" Kaelin suggested, his energy flickering with concern. "Possible," Alara acknowledged. "But if so, why would he remain in one place? Why build a shelter, as if intending to stay?" Aria closed her eyes again, trying to recapture what she had sensed in those final moments before the vision ended. There had been something else, something at the periphery of her awareness, a shadow moving against the natural energy flows of the forest, a cold presence that felt strangely familiar. "We need to reach him," she decided, opening her eyes. "Not just through scrying, but physically. He's in danger, but I don't think he's running because he can't. He's waiting for something, or someone." "Us," Alara said simply. "The stones call to each other, and to their bearers. He knows instinctively that you will come for him." "Then we must not delay," Aria stated, rising from her seat with newfound determination. I need to tell Magnus what I've seen. She left the library with Kaelin following close behind, his aura betraying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As they crossed the central courtyard toward the council chambers where Magnus was meeting with the visiting Alphas, Aria became aware of a commotion at the main gates. A lone figure staggered through the entrance, supported by 2 guards. Blood stained their clothing, and their energy signature fluctuated weakly, a wolf on the verge of collapse. With a shock, Aria recognized one of the scouts who had departed with Thane that morning. Impossible, Kaelin murmured beside her. They couldn't have reached the Western Pass and returned so quickly. They rushed forward as the injured scout was lowered gently to the ground. Others were gathering quickly, drawn by the disturbance. Aria knelt beside the wounded wolf, a young female with cropped dark hair and a deep gash across her shoulder and chest. Ambush! The scout gasped, her eyes unfocused with pain and exhaustion. 5 miles west. They were waiting. Who? Aria asked urgently. Devourers? The scout shook her head weakly. Wolves, but not wolves. Eyes like empty night. They moved wrong. She coughed, blood speckling her lips. Thane ordered retreat. Sent me to warn. The others tried to hold them off. How many attacked you? Came Magnus's voice as he pushed through the gathering crowd, Rorik and Isolde close behind him. Dozens, the scout whispered. Appeared from nowhere. No scent, no sound, until too late. Her eyes rolled back as consciousness finally slipped away. Magnus barked orders for the healers, then turned to the guard captain who had been organizing the compound's defenses. Double the perimeter watch. No one enters or leaves without direct authorization from me. What could take down an elite scouting party less than an hour into their journey? Isolde wondered aloud, her copper hair gleaming in the morning sun. Something that knew they were coming, Rorik growled, his weathered face grim. This wasn't chance. They were targeted specifically. The traitor, Aria realized suddenly. Magnus, someone in the compound must have passed information to the enemy. His aura darkened with rage and concern. We've been compromised, he agreed. But by whom? And how deep does the betrayal go? A tense silence fell over the gathered wolves. Suspicion rippled through the crowd as pack members glanced at one another, suddenly uncertain whom to trust. We cannot delay our plans, Aria said firmly. I've located Corvus. He's in the Forgotten Forest, near the Twin Sentinels. That's in the opposite direction from the ambush, Rorik noted. Perhaps a smaller party could slip away unnoticed while attention is focused on the western approach. It's too dangerous, Magnus objected. If there are spies among us, any movement will be reported. Not if no one knows the true destination, Isolde suggested, her quick mind already formulating a strategy. We could arrange a visible departure to the south, a plausible mission that would draw attention, while a smaller group slips away to the northeast. A diversion, Magnus considered, his tactical mind evaluating the proposal. It could work, but who would go north? The journey is treacherous even without the threat of ambush. I must go, Aria stated without hesitation. The stones need to be united, and Corvus won't come to us. He can't. Something is holding him there. Then I go with you, Magnus said immediately, his tone brooking no argument. No! The word came simultaneously from Aria, Rorik, and Isolde. It was Rorik who continued. You cannot leave the compound undefended, especially now. The Alpha King's presence is what holds the Alliance together. If you disappear, panic will spread faster than wildfire. Magnus's frustration was palpable, his aura churning with conflicting imperatives, the need to protect Aria personally versus his duty to the larger pack. I will accompany the seer, Isolde offered unexpectedly. My tracking skills are unmatched, and as a visiting alpha, my movements will draw less scrutiny than your own warriors. I should go too, Kaelin spoke up suddenly, surprising everyone, including himself. He flushed under the sudden attention, but continued bravely. I've studied the old maps extensively. The Forgotten Forest is treacherous, full of hidden ravines and false paths. I can guide you through safely. Magnus studied the young Omega, clearly weighing his worth against the risk. "Why would you volunteer for such a dangerous mission?" he asked directly. Kalen straightened, his aura steadying with resolve. "Because the storm threatens all wolves, not just alphas and betas. Because knowledge is worthless if not put to use when needed most." He paused, then added more quietly, "And because I've seen what happens to those touched by the darkness. My family in the southern valleys was among the first to disappear 3 months ago." His personal stake in the mission silenced further questions. Aria felt a surge of respect for the young librarian, his courage in stepping forward despite his lower status in the pack hierarchy. "A small party of 3 might succeed where a larger group would draw attention," Rorik acknowledged. "But they'll need protection. My best warrior, Lara, will accompany them. She can pass as a beta from Isolde's pack easily enough." Magnus still appeared torn, his protective instincts warring with strategic necessity. "If Aria is captured or killed, all is lost," he stated bluntly. "If I don't go, all is lost anyway," she countered gently. "We need Corvus. We need the 3 stones united. Without that, we have no chance against the storm." A heavy silence fell as the weight of her words sank in. Finally, Magnus nodded reluctantly. "Very well. But you'll take Serena as well. She's proven her loyalty beyond question, and her combat skills match any betas." Relief flooded through Aria at the mention of her friend. Serena's presence would be a comfort in the uncertain journey ahead. "The southern diversion must be convincing," Isolde noted. "A significant force with a plausible mission." "We'll spread word that we're establishing a fortified outpost near the southern lakes," Magnus decided. "It's a logical defensive position if we're expecting attacks from the west. I'll lead that mission myself, making it impossible to question its importance." "When do we leave?" Aria asked, already mentally preparing for the journey. "Tonight," Magnus answered, "under cover of darkness. The southern mission will depart at dawn, drawing all eyes away from the compound's northeastern exit." As the others dispersed to make preparations, Magnus drew Aria aside, his energy a storm of concern and barely contained fear. "I don't like this," he confessed in a low voice. "Every instinct I have screams against letting you go without me." She touched his face gently, feeling the strong line of his jaw beneath her fingers. "I know, but sometimes the strongest protection comes not from standing in front, but from securing what lies behind. You give me a safe place to return to, a center that holds when everything else is in chaos." He covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss against her palm. 3 days to reach the Forgotten Forest, 1 day to find Corvus, 3 days to return," he recited, echoing his earlier words about the scouting party. 7 days, Aria. If you're not back in 7 days, I will tear apart the forest to find you. Duties be damned." "I'll return," she promised, "with Corvus and the 3rd stone, and then we'll face the storm together, as the prophecy foretold." They spent the remaining hours of daylight in careful preparation. Maps were studied, provisions gathered discreetly, and communication signals established. Serena, when informed of the mission, accepted without hesitation, her steady blue aura reflecting her unwavering loyalty. As dusk fell, Aria retreated briefly to her chambers to gather essential items for the journey. The small bag contained little: a change of clothing, her grandmother's journal, and a hunting knife Magnus had insisted she take. The moonstone pendant would remain around her neck, where its power could guide her. A soft knock announced Elder Alara's presence. The ancient wolf entered slowly, carrying something wrapped in faded red silk. "For your journey," she said, placing the bundle in Aria's hands. Unwrapping it carefully, Aria revealed a silver circlet set with small, clear crystals that caught the lamplight and broke it into rainbow fragments. "A seer's crown," Alara explained. "Not for vanity, but for function. The crystals are focus points, designed to amplify your natural abilities and protect your mind during deep scrying. Your grandmother wore it in her youth, before the gift began to fade from our bloodline." Aria touched the delicate metalwork with reverence. "I didn't know such things existed." "Much of our heritage was hidden as persecution grew," Alara said sadly. sacred objects disguised as simple jewelry, ancient texts concealed within mundane records, practices maintained in secret and passed only through whispers. The elder's gnarled fingers adjusted the circlet carefully on Aria's brow. The metal felt cool at first, then warmed rapidly against her skin, as if recognizing its rightful wearer. "There," Alara said with satisfaction. "Now you look the part as well as play it." "I'm not sure I'm ready," Aria admitted, voicing the fear that had lurked beneath her determination. "What if my powers fail when needed most? What if I can't convince Corvus to return with us?" Alara's ancient eyes held the wisdom of generations as she regarded the young seer. "Readiness is a luxury rarely granted to those called to great purpose," she said simply. "You do not need to be perfect, child. You only need to be present, to face each moment with the courage you have already demonstrated." She touched the moonstone pendant that hung at Aria's throat. "Remember that this stone chose you as much as you were chosen to bear it. Trust in that connection. When doubt threatens to overwhelm you, listen to the stone's voice. It carries the wisdom of all who bore it before you." A horn sounded in the distance, the signal that night had fully fallen and the compound was securing for evening. Soon, Aria would need to meet the others at the northeastern postern gate, where their small party would slip away under cover of darkness. "It's time," Alara said softly. "May the moon light your path when the way seems darkest." The ancient wolf embraced her briefly, then stepped back to allow Aria to collect her few belongings. As Aria moved toward the door, a sudden thought struck her. "Elder Alara, you've known about me since I was a child. You watched over me from a distance all these years. Why didn't you ever speak to me directly? Why leave me in ignorance of my heritage?" Alara's aura flickered with old sorrow and regret. "Because knowledge can be as dangerous as ignorance in its way. Your grandmother believed, and I agreed, that the safest path was to let your gift emerge naturally when the time was right. To force its awakening prematurely might have drawn attention we couldn't afford." She sighed heavily. "Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps if you had been prepared earlier—" "No," Aria interrupted gently. "I understand now. If I had known earlier, I might have revealed myself before I was strong enough to withstand what followed." She touched the circlet that now rested on her brow, feeling its subtle energy mingling with her own. "Everything unfolds as it must, in its proper time. Isn't that what the ancient texts teach us?" Alara smiled, her aged face lighting with unexpected warmth. "Indeed they do. Go now, young seer. Find the healer and bring him home. The warrior awaits you both." With those words echoing in her mind, Aria left her chambers for the last time, stepping into the cool night air and toward the uncertain path that destiny had laid before her. Whatever dangers lurked in the shadows ahead, whatever traitors hid among those she had trusted, whatever horrors the storm might bring, she would face them with the growing power that flowed through her veins. The hunt for Corvus had begun, and with it, the race to unite the three stones before the storm devoured everything in its path. The northeastern postern gate stood partially concealed by ancient oak trees, their massive trunks offering shadow even from the bright moonlight that bathed the rest of the compound. Aria arrived to find her traveling companions already waiting, Isolde with her distinctive copper hair now darkened with herb-stained mud for concealment, the warrior Lyra checking the straps on her weapons pack, Serena adjusting the provisions, and Kaelin nervously consulting a small leather-bound map. "You're wearing the Seers' crown," Serena noted with surprise as Aria approached. "Elder Alara's gift," Aria explained, touching the silver circlet lightly. "For focus and protection." Isolde studied her with appraising eyes. "It suits you. Though we should cover it during travel, silver reflects moonlight too well." She handed Aria a hooded cloak of dark green wool, similar to those the others already wore. The practical garment would help them blend with the forest shadows and ward off the early autumn chill that descended at night. As Aria fastened the cloak, the gate guard, one of Magnus's most trusted beta warriors, approached with final instructions. "The king says to remind you to maintain absolute silence until you're beyond the outer perimeter," he whispered. We've detected unusual movement in the eastern forest since sunset. Could be ordinary wildlife, could be something else." "Any sign of the ambushed scouting party?" Lyra asked, her hand resting on the hilt of her short sword. The guard shook his head grimly. "Nothing. And the injured scout died an hour ago without regaining consciousness." A somber silence fell over the group. They were venturing into increasingly dangerous territory, with limited information and the knowledge that stronger parties had already fallen. "The southern mission preparations are well underway," the guard continued after a moment. "They depart at dawn with full ceremony. All eyes will be on them." "Good," Isolde nodded. "We should move now, while the compound sleeps." With practiced efficiency, the guard unsealed the small gate, its ancient hinges silenced with oil. One by one, they slipped through the narrow opening into the darkened forest beyond. Aria went last, pausing briefly to cast her awareness back toward the center of the compound, where she knew Magnus would be lying awake, his thoughts with her despite the distance. "Stay safe," she whispered, hoping somehow the sentiment might reach him. Then she stepped through the gate, heard it close softly behind her, and faced the wilderness ahead. The first hours of their journey passed in tense silence. Isolde took the lead, her tracking skills allowing her to find game trails through the dense underbrush that would leave minimal signs of their passage. Lyra followed, alert for any threat, while Kaelin stayed close to Aria in the center of their formation, with Serena guarding the rear. They moved without torchlight, relying on the moon and stars filtering through the forest canopy. For the others, this made the trek challenging, but for Aria, the world had never been more visible. Her enhanced perception registered every energy signature in the forest. The sleeping birds nestled in branches, small nocturnal mammals scurrying through underbrush, ancient trees drawing energy slowly from the earth beneath. The forest was alive with patterns of light and flow that ordinary vision could never detect. Around midnight, Isolde signaled for a brief rest. They gathered in a small hollow surrounded by dense ferns, speaking only in whispers. "We're making good progress," Isolde confirmed, consulting the stars. "If we maintain this pace, we should reach the river crossing by dawn." "I sense no pursuit," Aria offered, extending her awareness behind them. "But there's something disquieting about the forest ahead. Not immediate danger, but a disturbance in the natural energy flows." Kaelin unfurled his map, tracing their route with a careful finger. "We're approaching the border between Magnus's territory and the unclaimed lands. The disturbance might be related to that boundary." "Unclaimed for good reason," Lyra muttered. "Those forests have been considered cursed since the Great War. Strange disappearances, unnatural silence, hunters who return changed, if they return at all." "Superstition," Isolde dismissed, though her aura betrayed a flicker of unease. "Perhaps not entirely," Aria said thoughtfully. "My grandmother's journal mentioned that areas where great violence occurred can develop tears in the natural fabric, places where the barrier between our world and others grows thin." "Others?" Serena questioned, brow furrowed. "The places between," Aria explained, drawing on half-remembered passages. "Not quite our reality, not quite beyond. The storm comes from such a place, neither fully here nor fully elsewhere." "Like the Valley of Three Moons," Kaelin realized, "a place that exists at the threshold." Isolde's expression grew troubled. "If the storm can enter through these tears, can we seal them somehow?" Aria shook her head. "Not directly, but uniting the stones might restore the balance that prevents further weakening. At least, that's what the ancient texts suggest." "All the more reason to reach Corvus quickly," Isolde concluded, rising to her feet. "We should continue." They pressed on through the night, the terrain gradually changing as they moved deeper into the wilderness. The well-established forests of Magnus's territory gave way to older, wilder growth. Massive trees with gnarled trunks, undergrowth that seemed to shift and reposition itself when not directly observed, strange phosphorescent fungi that glowed with unsettling blue-green light. By false dawn, they reached the promised river, a swift, dark waterway that marked the official boundary between the United Pact territories and the unclaimed wilderness beyond. They paused at its edge, gazing across at the mist-shrouded forest on the far bank. "The forgotten forest," Kaelin whispered, with equal parts fear and fascination. "Few have entered it in generations." Isolde scanned the riverbank, searching for the safest crossing point. "The water runs high and fast here. We'll need to move upstream to the narrows." As they followed the riverbank, Aria became increasingly aware of a strange sensation, a pulling at her awareness, as if something across the water called to her. She touched the moonstone pendant, finding it warm against her skin. "The stone senses its counterpart," she realized aloud. "Corvus is definitely in those woods." "Can you pinpoint his location more precisely?" Lyra asked, practical as always. Aria closed her eyes, focusing on the pendant's energy. The sensation grew stronger, taking on direction. "Northeast," she said with certainty. "Perhaps half a day's journey beyond the river, toward the twin mountain peaks we saw in the scrying bowl." They reached the narrows where the river squeezed between two rocky outcroppings, creating a natural ford of exposed stones. Crossing would still be treacherous. The rocks were slick with moss, and the current powerful enough to sweep away anyone who lost their footing. "One at a time," Isolde instructed. "I'll go first, then help guide the rest of you across." The Alpha moved with impressive agility, leaping from stone to stone with barely a pause. Upon reaching the far side, she secured a length of rope to a sturdy tree and tossed the end back across to serve as a handhold for the others. Lyra went next, equally nimble despite the weapons she carried. Kaelin followed, moving more cautiously, but managing the crossing without incident. Aria prepared to go next when Serena suddenly stiffened beside her, head tilted in alert attention. "Wait," she whispered urgently. "Listen." They fell silent. At first, Aria heard nothing beyond the rush of the river. Then, faintly but unmistakably, came the sound of movement through the underbrush behind them. Not the random rustling of wildlife, but the deliberate approach of multiple large bodies trying to move stealthily. "We've been followed," Serena hissed, drawing her daggers. "Cross now," Lyra called from the far bank, notching an arrow to her bow. "We'll cover you." Aria hesitated, torn between the urgency to reach the safety of her companions and reluctance to leave Serena alone to face whatever approached. "Go," Serena insisted, physically nudging her toward the ford. "The mission matters more than any one of us." Heart pounding, Aria grasped the rope and began picking her way across the slippery rocks. The water rushed around her ankles, shockingly cold and powerful. Halfway across, a stone shifted beneath her foot. She stumbled, nearly falling into the churning water before regaining her balance. A harsh, guttural howl pierced the dawn air behind her. Throwing a glance over her shoulder, Aria saw them, wolves emerging from the forest edge, but wrong somehow, their movements jerky and unnatural, their eyes empty black voids. At least a dozen, with more appearing every moment. "Hurry!" Isolde shouted from the far bank. Serena stood her ground at the river's edge, knives gleaming in the early light. As the first corrupted wolf lunged for her, she moved with deadly precision, blades finding vulnerable points with practiced ease. The creature fell, but 3 more immediately took its place. "Serena!" Aria cried as her friend disappeared beneath a mass of attacking bodies. An arrow whistled past, striking one attacker squarely in the skull. Another followed, then another, as Lyra unleashed a rapid volley from the opposite bank. The precision of her aim was astonishing, each shaft finding its mark despite the chaotic movement. Aria forced herself to continue crossing, knowing she could do nothing to help from her precarious position on the rocks. 3 more steps brought her to the far side, where Kaelin grabbed her arm and pulled her up onto solid ground. From this vantage point, she could see Serena again, somehow still fighting, her form a blur of motion as she held the attackers at bay. But the corrupted wolves kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "She can't hold them much longer," Isolde stated grimly, "and we can't reach her without being overwhelmed ourselves." "We have to try something," Aria insisted, panic rising in her throat. Before anyone could formulate a plan, Serena glanced back at them across the river, her face set in determined resignation. Meeting Aria's eyes one last time, she mouthed what looked like "find him" before deliberately slashing the rope they had used to cross. "No!" Aria screamed as the rope fell away, splashing into the rushing water. In the same moment, Serena turned and charged directly into the mass of attackers, driving them back from the riverbank with the fury of her assault. It was a suicide maneuver, designed to buy the others time to escape. "We have to go now," Isolde said firmly, gripping Aria's shoulder. "Her sacrifice must not be wasted." "She's right," Lyra added, though her voice was rough with emotion. "These woods will slow the corrupted wolves down if they try to find another crossing, but that advantage won't last long." Numb with shock and grief, Aria allowed them to guide her away from the riverbank and into the dense shadows of the forgotten forest. As the sounds of battle faded behind them, a hollow ache spread through her chest. Serena had been her only friend during the lonely years of blindness and isolation, the one constant in a world that had otherwise rejected her. Now she was gone, and Aria hadn't even been able to say goodbye. They pushed deeper into the forest, moving as quickly as the difficult terrain allowed. The trees here grew impossibly ancient and massive, their trunks wider than 3 wolves standing nose to tail. Mist clung to the forest floor, swirling around their ankles as they passed. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, not quite animal, not quite something else. After an hour of hard travel, Isolde finally called for a brief rest in a small clearing. Aria sank onto a fallen log, her grief a physical weight pressing against her chest. "I should have done something," she whispered, "used my powers somehow." "There was nothing you could have done," Isolde said firmly, but not unkindly. "Serena made her choice, the choice of a true warrior, to protect what matters most. She believed in you," Lyra added quietly, "in what you're trying to accomplish. Honor that belief by continuing the mission." Aria brushed away tears with the back of her hand, trying to center herself. Serena would indeed want her to press forward, to find Corvus and unite the stones. Allowing grief to overwhelm her now would make her friend's sacrifice meaningless. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the pendant again, seeking direction. "This way," she said after a moment, pointing toward a particularly dense section of forest. "The pull is stronger now. We're getting closer." They resumed their journey, the forest growing stranger with each passing mile. Time seemed to function differently here. Shadows fell at impossible angles, sunlight filtering through the canopy in patterns that defied the sun's actual position. Vegetation shifted from normal to bizarre. Flowers that followed their movement with eyeless blooms, vines that retracted from their touch as if burned, fungi that emitted soft, almost musical tones when disturbed. "This place is wrong," Kaelin murmured, staying close to Aria's side. "The old maps warn of areas where reality grows thin, but I never truly believed." "Believe it now," Lyra replied tersely, "and stay alert. This forest wants something from us." "Not from us," Aria corrected, a realization dawning. "From the stones. They belong to this place in a way, or rather, they connect to it." The pendant grew warmer against her skin as they progressed, its energy pulsing in a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The Seers' crown on her brow also responded to the strange energies of the forest, occasionally sending small tingles across her scalp when they passed certain trees or rock formations. By midday, though the concept seemed increasingly irrelevant in this twisted woodland, they reached a familiar landmark, the base of a rocky hillside with a distinctive outcropping that resembled a wolf's head in profile. Aria recognized it immediately from her scrying vision. "We're close," she whispered. "Corvus's shelter should be just beyond that rise." They proceeded with extreme caution, aware that they might be walking into a trap. Lyra took the lead, bow ready, while Isolde circled to approach from another angle. Kaelin remained with Aria, his nervous energy betraying his fear despite his determination to continue. As they crested the rise, Aria saw it, the small clearing with its crude shelter built against the rock face. But something was wrong. The fire pit contained only cold ashes, and there was no sign of Corvus. "Spread out," Isolde ordered quietly. "Search for tracks, signs of struggle, anything that might indicate what happened." They examined the small camp methodically. The shelter appeared hastily abandoned, a half-eaten meal still laid out, a water skin left uncapped, a bedroll partially unrolled. Lyra found footprints leading away from the camp into the deeper forest, but they vanished abruptly after a few yards, as if their maker had simply disappeared, or been taken. "He left in a hurry," Kaelin observed, picking up a small leather notebook that had been dropped near the fire pit. "Less than a day ago, judging by the state of the ashes." Aria knelt beside the fire circle, extending her senses beyond ordinary perception. The residual energies told a story. Corvus had indeed been here, his aura now recognizably tinged with the Spirit Stone's influence. But there was something else too, a cold presence that had passed through the clearing like a shadow falling across the sun. "He sensed something coming," she said slowly. "The same presence I felt during the scrying. He fled, but not in panic, with purpose." She rose to her feet, turning slowly to orient herself. "This way." She led them deeper into the forest, following not physical tracks, but the faint energy signature left by the Spirit Stone's passage. The trees grew impossibly denser, forcing them to squeeze through narrow gaps between ancient trunks. The mist thickened until visibility was reduced to arm's length, and sounds became muffled, distorted. After what felt like hours, but might have been minutes in this twisted place, they emerged suddenly into a perfectly circular clearing. At its center stood a stone altar, ancient and weathered, covered in symbols that matched those on Aria's pendant. And kneeling before it, his back to them, was Corvus. He didn't turn as they entered the clearing, though he must have heard their approach. His hands were pressed flat against the altar's surface, his head bowed as if in prayer or deep concentration. Around his neck, the teardrop moonstone glowed with a pulsing light that matched the rhythm of Aria's own pendant. "Corvus," she called softly, stepping forward while gesturing for the others to remain at the clearing's edge. Slowly, he turned to face her. The change in him was even more dramatic than what she had glimpsed in her vision. Gone was the hollow void that had consumed him. His aura now swirled with deep purple light, shot through with healing green and silver. His physical appearance had transformed as well, the harsh lines of hatred erased from his face, replaced by an expression of profound, sorrowful wisdom. "Aria," he greeted her, his voice roughened as if from disuse. "I knew you would come. I've been waiting." "You have the Spirit Stone," she said, indicating the glowing pendant at his throat. He touched it lightly. "It found me, rather than the reverse. After what happened at the ceremony, I wandered without direction, consumed by confusion and shame for what I had become." His eyes took on a distant look. "Then 3 nights ago, I dreamed of this place. When I awoke, the stone was beside me, glowing, calling me here." "What is this place?" she asked, approaching the altar cautiously. "A gateway," he replied simply. "One of several scattered throughout the old territories, portals to the Valley of 3 Moons." Aria's breath caught. "Then we found it? The way to the valley?" Corvus shook his head. "Not yet. This is merely a marker, a pointer to the true path. The gateway itself can only be opened when the 3 stones are united and the blood moon rises." He nodded toward the altar. "These inscriptions are instructions left by those who came before." Aria moved to stand beside him, studying the ancient symbols carved into the stone. Though the language was unknown to her, their meaning seemed to flow into her mind through some connection with her seer's gift. "3 must stand as one," she translated softly. "Sight to find the way, strength to break the barrier, spirit to heal the breach." "Your gift grows quickly," Corvus observed. "You read the old tongue without training." "Many things come to me now that were hidden before," she admitted. "Memories not my own, knowledge I never learned." He nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "The seer doesn't merely possess the gift. She becomes a vessel for all those who carried it before. Their wisdom flows through you, if you open yourself to it." A sudden rustling from the forest's edge drew their attention. Isolde, Lyra, and Kaelin had moved into defensive positions, weapons ready as they scanned the surrounding trees. "We're not alone," Lyra warned, arrow nocked and drawn. "No," Corvus agreed grimly. "We're not. They've been tracking me since I arrived in this forest. That's why I had to abandon my camp, to draw them here, away from the path you would take." "Who?" Aria asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Devourers," he confirmed, "but not like those you faced before. These are evolved, directed by something older, something that remembers me from when I was one of them." As if summoned by his words, they appeared, melting out of the mist at the edges of the clearing. Unlike the corrupted wolves they had faced at the river, these creatures maintained a more humanoid form, their bodies composed of swirling shadow barely contained within a wolf-like outline. Their eyes glowed with an unsettling violet light, fixed hungrily on the stones carried by Aria and Corvus. "They want the stones," Corvus stated, moving to stand protectively in front of Aria. "They've always wanted them, to corrupt their power, to prevent them from being united." "Why didn't you tell us this was a trap?" Isolde demanded as she backed toward the altar, keeping the approaching Devourers in view. "Not a trap," Corvus corrected. "A necessary confrontation. The path to the valley cannot be found without first facing the guardians who prevent its discovery." The Devourers circled slowly, not attacking immediately, but gradually tightening their perimeter. Aria counted at least 15, with more shadowy forms visible in the forest beyond. "We can't fight that many," Lyra muttered, her bow tracking the nearest creature as it glided forward. "No," Aria agreed, a sudden certainty filling her. "We aren't meant to." Before anyone could stop her, she stepped forward, away from the protective circle of her companions, and raised her pendant high. The stone blazed with silver light, casting long shadows across the clearing. "We seek the valley," she called out, her voice stronger and more resonant than she had intended. "By ancient right and sacred covenant, we claim passage." The Devourers froze, their violet eyes fixed on the glowing stone. A strange, sibilant whispering passed among them, like dry leaves scraping across stone. One creature, larger than the others, moved forward. Unlike its companions, this devourer retained more distinct features, the suggestion of a face, with hollow cheeks and eyes that held a spark of cruel intelligence. "The covenant is broken," it hissed, its voice like wind through a graveyard. "The stones were scattered, the balance destroyed, the way is closed." "The stones return now to their rightful bearers," Aria countered, drawing on knowledge that came to her as she spoke. "The covenant stands while even one remembers." The creature cocked its head, studying her with malevolent curiosity. "You are incomplete," it observed. 3 stones, 3 bearers. I count only 2. It gestured toward Aria and Corvus with a misshapen limb. "Where is the 3rd? Where is strength?" A tense silence fell over the clearing. The creature was right. Without Magnus and the 3rd stone, they could not fulfill the requirements of the ancient covenant. Aria felt a moment of doubt. Had they come all this way only to fail because Magnus remained at the compound? Had their careful planning overlooked this crucial detail? Then unexpectedly, Isolde stepped forward. "I carry it," she declared firmly, reaching into a hidden pocket within her cloak. To Aria's astonishment, she withdrew the jagged, mountain peak-shaped stone that had been presented at the council meeting. "As regent for the Alpha King, I bear the stone of strength in his stead." The Devourer hissed in displeasure, clearly unprepared for this development. "Impossible. The stone chooses its bearer. It cannot be carried by proxy." "Cannot it?" Isolde challenged. "The stones were made to serve the Pax, not to rule them. Where necessity demands adaptation, the old ways bend." She held the stone aloft, and to everyone's surprise, it began to glow with a deep crimson light, responding to her will. The lead Devourer retreated a step, its shadowy form rippling with uncertainty. 3 stones, Aria stated, stepping forward to stand beside Isolde. 3 bearers. The covenant holds. Corvus joined them, completing their triangle before the altar. The 3 stones glowed in harmony, silver for sight, crimson for strength, emerald for spirit, their light pushing back the mist and shadow that surrounded them. "By ancient right," Corvus intoned, his voice blending with Aria's, "we claim passage." "Show us the way," Isolde commanded, her alpha authority lending power to the words. The lead devourer let out a shriek of frustration and rage, but it was bound by rules older than itself. It gestured sharply, and the gathered creatures began to withdraw, melting back into the forest mist. "The way opens with blood and moonlight," it hissed before disappearing entirely. "Return at the crimson hour, when night and day hold equal sway. Bring the three as one, and the path will appear." Then they were gone, leaving only swirling mist in their wake. "The equinox," Kaelin whispered, breaking the stunned silence that followed. "The blood moon rises on the autumn equinox, 4 days from now." "When night and day hold equal sway," Lyra repeated. "It makes sense. A time of perfect balance to find a place that exists between worlds." Aria turned to Isolde, questions burning in her mind. "You've had the third stone all along? Why didn't you tell us?" The Eastern Alpha's expression was unreadable. "Because knowledge of the stone's whereabouts needed to remain limited. Magnus and I agreed that I would carry the Strength Stone as his proxy until we confirmed whether Corvus truly possessed the Spirit Stone." "A wise precaution," Corvus acknowledged, studying Isolde with newfound respect. "Though it seems the stone has accepted you as more than a mere carrier, it responds to your touch." Isolde looked down at the crimson stone, surprise flickering across her features. "Perhaps because I act in service to strength, not seeking to possess it for myself," she suggested. "The old texts speak of how the stones sometimes choose unexpected bearers in times of great need." "Whatever the reason," Aria said, "we now have what we need to return on the equinox and open the gateway. We should head back to the compound immediately with this news." A troubled look crossed Corvus's face. "I cannot return with you," he said quietly. "Not yet." "What? Why not?" Aria demanded. "We need you, all 3 stones together, to face the storm." He touched the spirit stone at his throat, his expression somber. "My healing is not complete. The stone has shown me much, but there are truths I must face alone before I can stand with you as an equal." His eyes met hers, filled with resolve. "I will meet you here on the equinox, that I swear. But until then, my path lies elsewhere." Aria wanted to argue, to insist he return with them, but something in his aura stopped her, a depth of purpose and certainty that brooked no challenge. "Do what you must," she finally conceded. "But remember, without you, all may be lost." "I remember," he assured her gravely. "And I will not fail you." With those words, he turned and walked into the forest, the emerald glow of his stone visible for several moments before the mist swallowed him completely. "Can we trust him?" Lyra asked bluntly once he had gone. "We must," Aria replied, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "The Sightstone recognizes him as its counterpart. If he says he will return, I believe him." "Then our course is clear," Isolde concluded, carefully returning the Strength Stone to its hiding place. "We return to the compound with news of what we've discovered. 4 days to prepare for what may be our final confrontation with the storm." As they gathered their belongings and prepared for the long journey back, Aria cast one last look at the ancient altar. They had found a way forward, but at terrible cost. Serena's sacrifice, Corvus's continuing solitary struggle, the traitor still hidden within their midst, and the growing threat of the storm all weighed heavily on her mind. Yet beneath the burden of responsibility and grief, a flicker of hope persisted. The 3 stones had been found, the ancient covenant remembered, and for the first time in centuries, the path to the Valley of 3 Moons lay open before them. Whatever awaited them there, they would face it together, sight, strength, and spirit united once more against the darkness that threatened to devour their world.